On a full moon night, beneath the vastness of towering mountains, a mysterious place shrouded in mist rises up. Inside, a young man named Manhua tries to meditate peacefully in his room, lost in thought about the direction of his life. The truth was, Manhua was just an ordinary student who dreamed of changing his destiny. Since he was a child, he had to learn to look out for himself, as his parents left and were never heard from again. With no one to rely on, he dedicated every second of his life to his studies, hoping to pass the imperial exams and secure a decent future. To fund this journey, he went to the extreme of selling his own family home and taking on massive debts. Unfortunately, despite trying for 3 consecutive years, he ended up failing every single time. Just as he was about to give up on everything and accept any random job, he found some children from the village, including his friendly Fugi, trapped in a mountain canyon. While he was trying to come up with a plan to rescue them, the sky around them suddenly changed. In the blink of an eye, a powerful gust of wind and light cut through the air right in front of him. A mysterious female cultivator appeared before him, saying the young man had potential and that it was destiny for him to go with them. Manhua ended up losing consciousness, and when he woke up, he realized his life had completely changed. He had been taken against his will to a massive sect of cultivators. That was the Kaoshan sect, a place that ironically offered a fresh start to someone who thought their life was over. The reality that he was now a part of that fantasy world finally began to sink in. After 4 months of hard work, Manhua reached the first level of Q condensation, stepping up from being a mere chore disciple. His achievement caught the attention of other sect members, who watched him with curiosity and surprise. With this breakthrough, he was officially promoted to an outer sect disciple of the Kaoshan sect. The elder in charge then directs him to go to the treasure pavilion to choose a magical weapon, and then settle into his new living quarters. Before dismissing him, the senior advises Manhua to read the first page of the cultivation scroll very carefully to ensure his survival. Upon opening the scroll, the young man comes across a bizarre teaching about the importance of having a powerful backer to prosper. Still confused by such a blunt philosophy, Manhua makes his way up the stone staircases of the mountain. He stops walking as soon as he spots his destination just ahead. Before him rises the majestic, multi-story temple that houses the sect's valuable artifacts. A voice from inside the pavilion authorizes him to enter and claim the item he is entitled to because of his promotion. With that, a small magical bag is tossed in his direction, glowing in mid-air. He catches the object, not understanding how something like that could simply appear right before his eyes. The voice explains that it is a storage bag and orders him to get inside quickly to choose his artifact. Without hesitation, the young man steps through the portal of light and enters the mysterious room. Inside, he finds shelves packed with exotic relics of all shapes and sizes. Fascinated by so many glowing options, he hopes to find something that will truly be useful for his cultivation level. In the midst of so many glittering treasures, a small mirror prominently displayed catches his attention. Looking closely, the young man realizes it is just an old, rusty bronze mirror that does not radiate any spiritual energy. Curious about that anomaly, he reaches out his hand and lightly touches the edge of the mirror. Suddenly, a long-haired disciple drops down from above with an acrobatic flip, praising the young man's good taste. Manhua is startled by the sudden appearance of this strange guy who keeps insisting on talking about destiny. The senior claims with absolute conviction that this simple mirror is actually the most mysterious treasure in the entire pavilion. With a very suspicious smile, the man tries to convince the newcomer that he is the chosen one to carry the object. He explains that the most powerful treasures always hide their shine and places the mirror into Manhua's hands. The smooth talker starts making up an epic story that the artifact was forged from a divine celestial light. He adds that not even the sect's patriarch himself could unlock its secrets, and that its true master would be unbeatable. Manhua becomes extremely suspicious, thinking that if even the sect's founder could not use the relic, it is probably useless. However, the senior dramatic insists. arguing that the patriarch's inability only proves how divine the tool really is. He even guarantees that he is a kind person, and that if the young man cannot use the mirror, he can come back and exchange it at any time. Sensing that the whole thing is a huge scam, and that the guy just wants to get rid of the item, Manhua extends his arm to put it back on the shelf. Seeing the rejection, the senior loses his patience and lands a heavy kick on the young cultivator. Manhua is thrown back, rolling awkwardly across the floor of the pavilion. He ends up outside the temple, while the senior warns him that sect rules strictly forbid returning a chosen artifact. Lying on the ground and completely baffled, the young man can only look in disbelief at the bronze mirror he is now forced to carry around. Night falls over the mountains, bringing a moment of silence after that turbulent welcome to the sect. As he settles into his new residence, which is much better than the old quarters, Manhua proudly reflects that he is no longer just a debt-ridden student, but an official outer disciple. His train of thought is abruptly interrupted by a desperate cry coming from outside his window. Suddenly, a massive splash of red fluids hits the window paper violently, leaving the young man completely horrified by the sight. Peeking outside, he sees a cultivator being heavily beaten and robbed by another disciple who demands his belongings without any mercy. Manhua covers his own mouth, trying not to make a sound so as not to reveal his presence to the attackers. At that moment, he remembers his senior's warning about the history of the Koshan sect, which was once the strongest in the state of Zhao. He had explained that the sect's rules are merciless and encourage internal fighting, causing other sects to call them a demonic sect. Although the sect distributes spiritual stones and pills on a monthly basis, disciples are free to rob one another, and there is even a public area meant for taking others down. Manhua realizes the warnings were no exaggeration, and that the world of immortals, far from being noble like in the stories, is actually a cruel law of the jungle. Even so, he accepts it, remembering that he was taken by force to be here, so he should not expect a warm welcome anyway. He then focuses his gaze on the ordinary, looking bronze mirror resting on the table. Analyzing it carefully, he concludes that having an apparently useless object is a blessing, as a powerful artifact would attract thieves and put his life in danger. Staring at his own reflection, Manhua understands that to survive in this den of wolves, his only real option is to grow stronger at all costs. The next day, some senior disciples watch him from afar and comment among themselves that it is not worth robbing someone who chose a broken mirror. They treat him with utter contempt, considering him useless garbage that is not even worth the effort of an attack. Walking through the sect, Manhua is relieved to notice that the mirror's bad reputation has actually been keeping troublemakers far away from him over the past few days. Despite the temporary peace, he notices that his cultivation has stalled, and that without a master or special pills, it will take years to level up. The young man faces a dilemma, as he needs stones and pills to evolve, but any weak newcomer who gets them ends up being robbed immediately. His line of reasoning is interrupted by shouts, calling all disciples to the central plaza, announcing the day of the monthly pill distribution. Hearing the call, Manhua is surprised and decides to join the crowd to see how the event works. At the location, the disciples anxiously comment on the presence of important elders and prominent seniors who rarely show up for the regular distribution. They notice that even Han Zong, one of the strongest cultivators in the outer sector, is present to compete for the pills. In the midst of the sect's elite, Manhua immediately recognizes the beautiful, white-haired cultivator who took him by force and brought him there. He hears other students commenting that the special pills have a 12-hour seal that prevents immediate consumption, triggering a literal manhunt. Manhua understands that the distribution is not a prize, but a pretext to instigate violent fights, until a powerful shout demands silence. Elder Shangguan Shu takes control and announces the distribution of one basic pill and half a spiritual stone to each person present. With a wave of his hand, he launches the glowing resources, which fly toward the eager crowd. All the disciples desperately reach out their hands to secure their monthly share of resources. Upon catching his portions, Manhua admires the purity of the small items and vows to protect them to finally speed up his progress. Next, the elder displays a glittering, valuable golden pill, sparking the greed of everyone present. The crowd goes wild upon realizing that the special prize is extremely precious, knowing that many will fight to the bitter end for it. While Manhua quietly prays that they fight far away from him, the elder suddenly announces that the golden pill will be given as an incentive to the newly promoted newcomer. The legendary golden pill shines brightly in the air, drawing every eye in the courtyard. Upon receiving the unexpected prize, Manhua panics completely, knowing that this wonderful pill is actually his death warrant. Dozens of senior, bloodthirsty cultivators lock their furious eyes directly onto the terrified young man. Frightened by the mental threats and whispers of doom beginning to rise around him, the young man finds himself completely cornered. An overwhelming wave of demands and promises of aggression echoes from all sides, demanding that he hand over the pill immediately. High on a nearby cliff, another sect authority watches the courtyard and laments the elder's cruel attitude in exposing the newcomer like that. He comments to a colleague that handing such a treasure to a defenseless young man is the same as ordering his downfall, though no one intends to interfere with the harsh local laws. They conclude that according to the strict rules established by the sect's founder, it is up to the boy's destiny to decide whether he survives or perishes. With that, before chaos can break out in the courtyard, a hand rises firmly, catching everyone's attention. Manhua speaks up loudly, publicly declaring that his arrival at the sect was the work of destiny and that he is immensely grateful to his savior. To everyone's surprise, he points directly to the beautiful and powerful senior Shuking as the person to whom he owes his new life. Bowing with the utmost respect, Manhua extends his hands and offers the valuable golden pill as a gift of gratitude to her. The crowd is left speechless by the genius move, because by handing the item over to such a powerful warrior, no one else will dare try to steal it. Shuking looks at the elder in charge to ensure that the transfer is permitted by the rules, receiving an affirmative answer from him. Elegantly, she accepts the young man's gift in front of the entire stunned audience. The flow of spiritual energy dissipates into the air as soon as the artifact is officially transferred into her possession. In return for the gesture, the senior announces that she will lend Manhua her old, rich cultivation cave on the southern mountain. Manhua thanks her with a massive smile on his face, while the other disciples burn with envy seeing that the newcomer's bold plan worked perfectly. On top of a nearby mountain, the sect elders laugh at Manhua's cleverness, commenting that the boy learned the most important lesson for survival in this place incredibly fast. Meanwhile, the young man heads to his new refuge, finding a massive stone door completely blocking the entrance to a dark cave. He pulls a green jade plaque sent by Shuking from his robe, knowing that it is the key to opening the stone portal. As he brings the object close to the entrance, the plaque begins to emit a vibrant, magical green glow. With a heavy thud, the entrance slowly opens and releases a dense mist of spiritual energy. Upon entering, Manhua is dazzled by the absurd amount of spiritual energy that fills that majestic environment. He notices a small spiritual spring in the center, realizing that Shuking's gift is immensely more valuable than any golden pill. The sun rises bright over the mountains, bringing a new beginning for the young cultivator. After an entire night of meditation, Manhua wakes up amazed to notice that his cultivation has advanced by the equivalent of nearly 2 months of ordinary effort. He realizes that the cave's energy grew weaker from being absorbed by him, but he knows the spiritual spring will soon recharge the area. Satisfied with his progress, the young man decides to leave his refuge to pay a visit and see how his chubby friend is doing. Walking through the forest, he reflects that the cave ensures his safety and that soon he will no longer need to hide from anyone. Suddenly, a mysterious rustling coming from the forest bushes catches his attention. Thinking of hunting some wild creature to prepare a feast for his friend, he slips the bronze mirror back into his robes. The young man leaps nimbly over the branches and dives toward the target hiding in the low vegetation. Manhua remembers his friend Li Fugui with fondness, the spoiled son of a wealthy merchant who ended up being captured along with him. Both went through a lot of trouble since they were brought to the sect together by Siu King. The chubby guy used to complain a lot in his sleep about losing his old life of luxury, but deep down, he proved to be extremely loyal. He took on the heavy labor of chopping wood so that Manhua could have more free time to study the cultivation scroll. Furthermore, the chubby guy had the strange habit of sleepwalking when he was hungry and managing to bite off chunks of solid wooden tables with his teeth. Meng Hao seriously suspected that this destructive set of teeth was the real reason the cultivators took an interest in the young man. Back in the present, the young man silently approaches a bush upon hearing new noises in the woods. With a quick movement, he manages to grab a plump pheasant and celebrates catching his future dinner. However, before any celebration can start, the bird's backside simply bursts in a cloud of red, leaving the young man completely horrified. Utterly shocked, Meng Hao tries to figure out if the creature suffered some kind of bizarre, spontaneous combustion. He feels something get very hot inside his robes, and upon pulling out the bronze mirror, he realizes the object is vibrating intensely. Intrigued by the coincidence, he analyzes the mirror to understand what kind of hidden power just manifested. Decided to test his theory, he runs deeper into the woods to do some practical trials. Shortly after, he spots a wild rabbit in the bushes and points the mirror directly at the animal. In that exact instant, the rabbit's backside also violently bursts, scattering red fluids onto the grass. Perched on a tree, he decides to test the bizarre spell on other animals crossing his path in the forest. His eyes begin to shine intensely as he realizes the ruthless efficacy of the artifact he previously judged to be garbage. Another loud burst happens in the forest, confirming the bizarre destructive power of the relic. After a walk, the path becomes filled with large wild beasts taken down in exactly the same manner. He excitedly concludes that the mirror is a formidable treasure, even if it has a weird quirk of bursting the backsides of its victims. Meng Hao resolves to head back to the safety of his cave to study the artifact better. Sitting on the ground, he counts up all the predators he managed to easily defeat during his expedition. However, he notices that the mirror had no effect on snakes or crocodiles, deducing that the mysterious power only works against furry creatures. To do a real test, he recalls the recent confrontation he had against a terrifying level 2 demonic ape. On that occasion, he channeled his energy and fired a concentrated beam of light from the mirror directly at the monster. The giant ape fell down lifeless instantly with its backside burst, proving that not even magical beasts can resist the terrifying power of the mirror. He also notices that the rust on the bronze is fading, indicating that the mirror seems to feed on these bursts to self-renew. Thanks to this bizarre victory, Meng Hao managed to obtain the valuable spiritual core of the furry monster. Back in his room, he carefully organizes all his wealth and achievements on the stone table. The young man admires his small personal treasure, knowing he is incredibly well supplied for a beginner. He wonders whether he should consume the powerful beast core or the key condensation pill first. As a precaution, he decides to start by ingesting the basic pill given by the sect to see how his body reacts. He feels the medicine quickly dissolve into streams of pure spiritual energy that travel through all his meridians. Confident after the first successful experience, Meng Hao next swallows the glowing green monster core. However, as soon as the core hits his stomach, the young man's eyes widen as he feels an overwhelming explosion of power that flies completely out of his control. With a quick leap, the young man rushes back to his stone bed, where an hour later, he emerges covered in a dark substance coming from inside his body. Sitting in the lotus position, he continues to meditate while dark, impure vapors are continuously expelled from his pores. He realizes he was careless with the overwhelming potency of that spiritual core, and that if he hadn't acted fast to channel the energy, his own body would have burst. The dark smoke surrounding him is nothing less than the mortal impurities being purified from his system, an essential process described in his cultivation scroll. After expelling all the impurities, the young man finally calms down, and a clean, renewed energy begins to emanate from him. Opening his eyes, he can barely believe that the monster core was so effective that it caused him to break through to the second level of QI condensation. Walking through the cave, he laments that demonic beasts are so rare because, with the mirror's help, he could level up indefinitely through pills. However, looking at the table, Manhua stands completely paralyzed and in shock at what he sees on top of the mirror. Taking a few steps back in surprise, he tries to understand how another core appeared on the table and soon realizes his half of a spiritual stone has vanished. The young man finally puts the pieces together and deduces that the bronze mirror absorbed the spiritual stone to perfectly duplicate the beast's core. Amazed by the discovery, he realizes he holds a relic capable of defying the laws of the world, though he wonders why no one before him noticed this secret power. Deciding not to waste time on unnecessary doubts, he concludes that he now urgently needs more spiritual stones to test the limits of this duplication. Unfortunately, the next pill distribution will still take over a month, leaving the young man frustrated to realize he is still broke even after becoming a cultivator. Facing the difficult situation with determination, he decides he will need to take risks and bold measures if he wants to prosper. With no more time to lose, Manhua decides to swallow the second duplicated core to boost his spiritual power even further. An overwhelming torrent of green and golden energy instantly spreads through his entire meridian system. Thanks to the definitive advance to the second level, he is finally eligible to learn and cast the sect's legendary immortal arts. Concentrating his power in his hands, he casts the Fire Snake spell for the very first time, creating intense flames around himself. In the deep forest, the young man tests his new ability by firing a massive blast of fire at an enraged giant bear. Despite the violent impact of the flaming attack, the beast resists the blow and roars furiously at the young man. Surprised by the bear's tenacity, Manhua realizes his magical art wasn't enough and draws his gleaming bronze mirror. With a well-aimed beam of light from the mirror, the bear's backside violently bursts, securing victory for the young man in his deep mountain hunt. Holding the new energy core obtained, he plans to use the next spiritual stone to duplicate it and quickly reach the third level. Hearing eerie howls echoing through the dark forest, he decides it's time to gather his spoils and head back before worse threats appear. 10 days pass, and the day of the pill distribution arrives, proceeding much more quietly since another elder is in charge of the event. As he tucks his new half of a spiritual stone into his bag, he reflects that the sect's ordinary pills aren't as useful now that he has monster cores. However, his attention is diverted as he notices a hostile movement occurring within the crowd. He sees several senior disciples assaulting and robbing the weaker ones right there, even before they leave the central plaza. Stepping away quietly, the young man knows that the protection of Zhu Qing's name won't last forever, and that he needs to get strong on his own as fast as possible. With a confident smile, he thinks that as soon as he completely masters the bronze mirror, the tables will turn and the attackers will become the hunted. Walking back along a forest trail, he reflects on how bizarre it is that the mirror doesn't work on humans, only on beasts with lots of fur. Midway, the young man suddenly notices a suspicious silhouette lurking behind a tree trunk up ahead. He tries to keep his composure and greets Senior Zhao Wuging, a cruel third-level cultivator famous for taking down newcomers to steal their resources. The red-haired man approaches arrogantly and bluntly orders the newcomer to immediately hand over his pills and stones. Manhua bows humbly, feigning cowardice and begging for a little mercy, making the brute smirk. Instead of just robbing him, the senior authoritatively announces that he will take possession of Manhua's rich spiritual cave and force him to be his personal servant. When the young man argues that the place belongs to Zhu Qing and he cannot give it up, the brute loses his patience and charges with a merciless attack. With no other choice, Manhua reacts quickly and casts his Fire Snake spell toward the attacker. A large explosion of flames engulfs the senior, kicking up dust and smoke along the forest path. However, the dust settles to reveal the attacker standing and practically unharmed, wielding his sword angrily. despite not being wounded. Zhao Wugang is extremely shocked to realize that the newcomer has already mastered that magical art and reached the second cultivation level so quickly. This revelation only makes the greedy senior desire to steal the young man's precious cave even more. With a devilish smile, he activates his secret demonization technique to take on a monstrous form. Realizing the imminent danger of facing that transformation, Manhua turns around and flees at full speed through the trees. The transformed senior leaps right behind him, shouting terrible threats that he will end the boy's life in that isolated spot. Looking back as he runs, the young man sees a furry, monstrous creature rapidly approaching. The monster slashes a violent claw through the air, but the young man manages to dodge it by a hair. Manhua slides across the dirt ground of the forest, trying to gain distance from the terrifying opponent. The giant beast corners the young man and brags that he will have the honor of being the first victim of his monster transformation technique. However, noticing the absurd amount of fur covering the enemy's transformed body, Menghua's eyes light up with joy as he realizes his bronze mirror has finally found the ideal target. Manhua points the bronze mirror directly at the monstrous face of the werewolf attacking him. In that same second, a devastating burst of energy and red fluids occurs right at the furry monster's backside. The impact is so violent that the beast falls heavily to its knees on the forest floor. While the monster roars in pain, not understanding what happened, Manhua celebrates in relief to see that his trick worked perfectly once again. Holding the mirror, the young man proposes a friendly truce, so they can both end the dispute right there and go their separate ways. Instead of accepting, the senior, consumed by hatred, shouts cruel threats that he will destroy Manhua and finish off his entire family. Hearing those terrible threats against his relatives, Menghua's expression becomes cold and ruthless as he realizes peace is no longer an option. Without a single hesitation, he prepares to deliver a new and decisive attack with his relic. The mirror shines again and hits the werewolf, causing the massive furry body to shudder and collapse onto the ground. The severe wound begins to drain heavily, sapping the last strengths of the opponent's demonic transformation. The monster lets out one last desperate roar of agony that echoes through the trees. Under the effect of the final blow, the beast plunges down the mountain in a cloud of red. The bronze mirror slips from his hands and falls silently into the damp forest grass. The young man remains frozen on the spot for a few moments, trying to process all the intensity of the combat he just experienced. Staring at the lifeless body of his attacker on the ground, Manhua feels a pit in his stomach, realizing he has just taken a life for the first time. As he walks through the low-level public zone, Manhua closely observes the place where lower-tier disciples duel and chaotically dispute resources. Before him, the combatants wage a fierce fight, where one of them ends up severely wounded by the opponent's sword attack. The winner celebrates arrogantly, proclaiming loudly that today will be the fallen opponent's day of doom. With that, Manhua suddenly emerges on the spot with a massive smile on his face, calling out to the wounded person with shouts. Sitting comfortably on top of a boulder with his improvised banner, the young man offers high-quality hemostatic pills to stop the wounded boy's bleeding. He announces with extreme friendliness that he sells each anti-bleeding pill for the bargain price of just one spiritual stone. Both the attacker and the victim are completely flabbergasted and outraged by the absurd price charged for the medicine. However, after the young man's persuasive insistence that a single investment will guarantee immediate revenge, the wounded person decides to buy and tosses the spiritual stone. Manhua catches the stone in mid-air with extreme satisfaction and throws the medicinal pill to his new customer. The buyer swallows the medicine immediately while preparing to resume his battle in the arena. Almost instantly, the deep cut on his shoulder begins to close and stop bleeding right before everyone's eyes. With a grin from ear to ear, Manhua thanks him for the business and wishes the duelists good trade. The opponent with spiky hair becomes furious upon realizing that his advantage in the fight was completely undone by that pill. While the two resume fighting fiercely, the young salesman watches everything from the best seat, already eyeing his next customer. Shortly after, the course of the fight reverses, and the other warrior also ends up receiving a painful blow. The previous attacker falls to his knees on the ground, pressing his bleeding wound with his hand in extreme agony. Like a good merchant, Manhua instantly appears by his side to offer his services and console the boy's pride. He sells 2 more pills to the newly wounded guy, justifying that his business is strictly professional and takes no sides. The young man calmly walks away from the fight with his banner on his shoulder, letting the two beat each other happily while he gathers more wealth. With this brilliant strategy, he walks across the entire public zone, selling medicine to dozens of wounded people, raking in an incalculable fortune, while planning to stock up on more medicine and monopolize the sect's market. Manhua doesn't notice that he is being closely watched by a suspicious silhouette. Suddenly, the attacker ambushes the young man, leaping from the trees with his sword drawn to take him down and rob him. However, the young man's reaction speed is far superior, and the intruder is struck down hard before he can even deliver the blow. Manhua observes the defeated opponent sprawled on the ground and comments with disdain that it would be impossible to be harmed by someone of that level. Without missing the opportunity, he collects the unconscious cheater's storage bag as compensation for the trouble. Opening the spoils, he marvels at counting a total of 53 glittering spiritual stones all at once. Back at his home, he celebrates the fact of getting rich so quickly in a peaceful manner without needing to engage in deadly combat all the time. Among the stolen belongings, he finds a valuable pink appearance, preserving pill, famous for being extremely expensive on the market. At that moment, the entrance to his cultivation cave opens silently, and a familiar silhouette emerges in the darkness. Manhua turns his head quickly to check who would dare invade his private sanctuary. To the young man's surprise, the imposing and beautiful Shu King enters the place with her usual serious expression. With all respect and formality, the young man immediately bows to greet his benefactor. The white-haired cultivator looks around suspiciously, inspecting every corner of her former spiritual abode. Satisfied to find that the place is in perfect order, she nods lightly. As the beautiful girl turns around to leave without saying a single word, Manhua tries to break the ice by inviting her to stay a bit longer. In the end, Su King declines the young man's invitation to stay, explaining that she will enter seclusion the next day and only stop by to see how he was doing. Manhua watches her leave in silence and then turns his gaze to an open book on his shelter's stone table. Reading the pages of that guide, he comes across the maxim that everyone needs a protector, because if a commoner manages to live without worries, it's certainly not because of a simple mountain. At another time, a hurried disciple runs through the forest and calls out loudly for Chu King, causing her to stop midway. The young man extends his hands, offering a glowing beauty pill, saying he saved up Q condensation pills for a long time to trade for it, insisting that only she is worthy of eternal youth. Su Kyung stares at the precious gift with her usual serene and indifferent expression, showing no sign of enthusiasm. Surprisingly, she reaches out her fingers and accepts the pill directly from the young cultivator's palm. She then firmly advises him, reminding him that condensation pills are crucial until the 5th level, and that in the world of immortals, evolution must always come first to secure one's own life. The young man bows bashfully and thanks Shu Kyung for the teachings, timidly admitting he acted on impulse, thinking she would like the gesture. She agrees to keep the pill this time, but warns him not to do it again, and in exchange, hands over a valuable jade pendant that serves as a defensive magical amulet. Extremely grateful, he suggests accompanying her on the path to ask some questions about cultivation, secretly thinking that being seen next to such an influential warrior will ensure no one in the sect dares mess with him. Shu King just stares at him in silence for a brief moment, maintaining her mysterious and expressionless posture. Finally, she consents, and the two begin walking together along the mountain trail. Their silhouettes move slowly beneath the grandness of the large rocky cliffs, bathed by the sunset. From afar, a long-bearded elder lets out an amused chuckle and comments to himself that the young Manhua is really not bad at all. He praises the fact that the boy perfectly understood the essence of survival in the Kaoshan sect by finding a strong ally and knowing that this relationship needs to be constantly nurtured. Meanwhile, a group of disciples gossips about Menghao's new achievement, spreading the rumor that he opened a pill shop on the mountain after roughing up Cao Yang and stealing his belongings. The others are outraged by the rumor, since Cao Yang is considered very strong and Meng Hao just entered the outer sector a few months ago. The young man who started the conversation smiles mysteriously and reveals that the story goes much deeper, as someone saw Meng Hao walking down the mountain alongside Zhu Qing, laughing and talking intimately. They reject the gossip immediately, arguing that Zhu Qing is widely known as a true ice queen and that no one has ever seen her smile at anyone. Even so, he insists that Meng Hao is indeed special, explaining that she even lent him her spiritual cave and likely gave him powerful treasures that will make his cultivation take off. Faced with so many unfair advantages, the trio of disciples lowers their heads, gripped by a deep feeling of envy over the boy's luck. In another quarter of the sect, a defeated and sweaty Tao Yang makes a formal bow to request an urgent audience with Senior Lu Qi. Bowed before the quarters, he bitterly reports that he was robbed by Meng Hao and that the newcomer is now making a high profit by selling medicine on Pengding Mountain to wounded duelists. Cao Yang creates a massive drama, claiming that the boy sells useless pills and forces others to buy them, begging on his knees for Lu Qi to step in to restore order and justice to the sect. From inside his quarters, Lu Qi accepts the complaint coldly and orders him to leave, receiving an enthusiastic thank you from the young man, who calls him cousin. The senior immediately delivers an angry lecture, reminding him that in the sect there are only senior brothers and no cousins, telling him to get out of there without blinking. Alone in his room, the leader of the low-level disciples, Lu Qi, reflects with intrigue on the brilliant idea of selling pills, lamenting that he never thought of something like that before. He realizes that constantly robbing newcomers is something too small for his level, and that having one's own medicine business is a true masterstroke. Shortly after, a new white banner containing mysterious ideograms is stretched out in the middle of the forest. Seeing what is happening right there in front of his trading spot, Meng Hao makes a face of complete dismay and disappointment. He finds himself facing Senior Lu Qi, comfortably installed under a new improvised banner that shamelessly announces the second branch of his own pill shop. Despite being frustrated by the blatant theft of his business idea, the young man decides to turn back to avoid conflict, noticing that the competitor is at the peak of the third cultivation level. Meanwhile, in the public arena, new duelists face each other fiercely with their swords to settle their old grudges and rivalries. One of the combatants delivers a brutal slashing blow across his opponent's chest, sending red fluids splashing through the air. The opponent staggers back in extreme agony, heavily wounded by the violent impact of the blade. Almost instantly, both Meng Hao and his new rival Lu Qi pop up beside the wounded men, offering healing pills for the same price of one spiritual stone. The warriors halt their battle and look totally confused from one side to the other, finding themselves surrounded by two competing salesmen fighting over the clientele. Without much choice, each of the wounded ends up closing a deal with a different merchant, with Meng Hao even offering a friendly discount to ensure customer loyalty in the next duel. The sun reaches the highest point in the sky, indicating that midday has finally arrived over the mountain of disputes. Upon counting his earnings from the entire morning, the young man becomes extremely frustrated to notice that he made only 2 miserable spiritual stones due to the heavy competition. On the other hand, Senior Lu Qi admires with enormous satisfaction the pile of glittering spiritual stones he managed to gather in just a few hours of work. He happily concludes that the business is incredibly profitable, but secretly plans to watch Meng Hao for a few more days to learn all the tricks of the trade before simply ending the newcomer's life. On the second day of business, the young man watches in horror as Lu Qi threatens customers with doom if they refuse to buy his medicine, realizing that it's nothing less than blatant robbery in broad daylight. By the third day, unable to make a single sale because the competitor scared away all the fighters with his violence, Manhua catches himself wondering if he should adopt the same aggressive tactic, but quickly discards the idea because he is not that type of person. On the fourth day, the situation escalates when Lu Chai approaches intimidatingly and threatens to crush Manhua's spiritual cultivation if he sees him stretching out his sales banner again the next day. On the fifth day, several cultivators gossip upon seeing Manhua sitting at the entrance of the public zone, mocking that he was certainly summoned by the ruthless number one of the newcomers and won't stand a chance against such power. Suddenly, the silence of the area is broken by the heavy sound of determined footsteps rapidly approaching the location. The spectators anxiously point toward the forest trail, announcing in whispers that the powerful senior Lu Chai has finally arrived for the final showdown. Content: before the rival can display any reaction of superiority, Manhua launches himself forward with a swift and overwhelming charge to take the initiative in the fight. The audience of disciples is completely shocked to realize that Manhua took the initiative and is actually going to fight the senior. Lu Chi draws his sword with a cold look, bluntly warning that the young man is only digging his own grave. The spectators instantly recognize the legendary purple sun sword, an extremely sharp item received by the senior as a reward for his great achievements in the sect. With a smug smile on his face, Lu Chi charges at high speed, wielding his glittering weapon. The two clash in a high-speed engagement, trading blows that make the sound of metal echo through the forest. Suddenly, Menghao's ordinary sword cannot withstand the impact of the rival's sacred weapon and ends up completely shattering. The impact of the blow is devastating, causing the loser of the collision to spit a large amount of fluids. Wiping the fluid from the corner of his mouth, Lu Chi steps back startled and realizes with horror that Manhua has actually already reached the fearsome fourth level of QI condensation. With total calmness, the young man confirms the opponent's suspicion, revealing that he reached this new peak of power the previous night. That night, outraged in his shelter by the threats and unfair competition of the senior who copied his business, Manhua wondered if there was no justice in that world. Realizing that talking about justice in that cruel sect was pure naivety, he organized all the spiritual stones he had saved to start a drastic process of duplicating pills using his magical mirror. Although the ordinary pills had a small effect individually, he knew that duplicating a massive quantity of them would end up generating an overwhelming accumulation of energy. Without hesitation, he swallowed dozens of pills all at once, unleashing a true storm of spiritual energy that shook the entire environment around him. Sitting in the midst of that immense storm of power, he reflected that he tried to follow a peaceful path with his business, but since the others insisted on tormenting him, he would make them pay dearly for it. Back in the present, Manhua stares at the weakened opponent and disdainfully asks if he still has the courage to continue the fight now that he knows the difference in level. The audience of disciples goes wild upon understanding that Manhua truly reached the fourth level in record time, figuring out that he only didn't enter the combat arena before because his power already surpassed the limit allowed for that low-level area. Even cornered and on his knees, the senior only lets out a grunt of disdain, refusing to accept defeat so easily. With a shout of fury, he quickly stands up and delivers a new blow in the protagonist's direction. Manhua blocks the attack with extreme ease using a flying sword, making sparks fly before his face. However, the young man's ordinary blade ends up shattered once again by the force of the purple sun sword. Lu Chai brags about his advantage, shouting that no ordinary sword from the newcomer will ever match the destructive power of his sacred weapon. Unshaken by the provocation, Manhua only ironically inquires about the value of a sharp weapon while reaching his hand toward his storage bag. With a simple gesture, he summons not just one, but several identical flying swords that begin to float around him. He mentally boasts about the unlimited power of his duplication mirror, ready to bury the opponent under an endless shower of blades. The young man launches the arsenal of swords simultaneously, creating a deadly trail of light that advances against the enemy. under the overwhelming pressure of so many coordinated attacks, Lu Chi's once indestructible purple sun sword breaks into 1,000 pieces. The spectators watch the scene, jaw dropped, unable to believe that the boy managed to smash the sacred relic using only ordinary flying swords. With a sarcastic tone, Meng Hao summons even more swords and asks his rival if he happens to have any more of those purple sun swords to offer as entertainment. Desperate and bloodied, the senior grips a small green gourd pendant around his neck, exclaiming with fury that the protagonist forced him to take an extreme measure. Upon noticing the activation of that mysterious object, the disciples watching the duel panic and begin to run desperately away from there. Suddenly, a gigantic spiritual projection of a glittering green gourd materializes in the air, radiating an intimidating energy. Lu Chi shouts furiously that this devastating weapon was a gift from his powerful protector Wang Tengfei, warning that the newcomer signed his death warrant by forcing him to use a treasure of such a high tier. The massive gourd fires a colossal beam of destructive light that tears up the forest floor toward the protagonist. The force of the impact generates a gust of wind so violent that the fleeing disciples can only look back terrified by such a demonstration of power. When the dust settles, Meng Hao emerges completely unharmed in the center of the crater, surrounded by the debris of his destroyed swords. The young man sighs in relief as he holds the green jade pendant Shu Qun gave him, recognizing that he would have been annihilated if it weren't for the excellent defensive barrier of that amulet. Lu Chi stands completely paralyzed and speechless, seeing that his most powerful blow didn't cause even a scratch on the opponent. He looks helplessly at his spiritual amulet, unable to accept that the trump card granted by his protector failed miserably. In the blink of an eye, Meng Hao moves swiftly and delivers a precise, violent kick. With extreme agility, the young man takes advantage of the blow to rip the valuable gourd pendant directly from the unsteadied opponent's neck. Holding the glittering artifact in the palm of his hand, he analyzes it with curiosity, trying to uncover what kind of secret that relic hides. Fallen and suffering from severe energy depletion from using an item above his level, the senior snaps that the young man will face the relentless fury of Wang Tengfei if he dares keep the amulet. Meng Hao coldly replies that sect rules allow keeping the spoils of whoever is defeated, while the rival desperately tries to appeal to the laws against taking lives in low-tier areas. The protagonist just points his finger in his direction with a ruthless look, stating that while he won't take his life, he will make sure to crush his spiritual cultivation as retribution for the previous day's threats. The senior retreats terrified in the darkness, begging in vain for mercy upon realizing he will lose all his hard-earned power. Night falls over the quiet mountain, bringing a temporary calm after the violent reckoning in the public arena. In his refuge, Meng Hao reflects that even knowing about the powerful protector behind his rival, he had no other real choice for survival, as conflict was inevitable to avoid ending up finished. Analyzing the whole sequence of events, since Tao Yang's first robbery, he concludes that general hostility was a path of no return, and that accepting submission at the beginning would only delay the inevitable. He looks at the beautiful emerald gourd, lamenting not having enough spiritual stones to duplicate it, and knows he cannot keep it for safety, but finds himself in a dilemma since Shu Qun is in total seclusion and inaccessible to receive the item. Propping up his face in dismay, the young man considers the risky idea of simply returning the treasure directly to Wang Tengfei, remembering having seen him in passing and thinking he seemed like a reasonable person. However, Meng Hao's moment of peace is broken when a messenger named Shangwan Song arrives shouting in front of the cave, ordering the young man to open the entrance immediately and receive him on his knees in the name of his leader, Wang Tengfei. Surprised by how quickly they came after the artifact, Meng Hao replies from inside that it's already late and that if the messenger has something to say, he should speak up right from there. Shangwan Song finds the newcomer's attitude extremely arrogant, but decides not to insist on opening the door and resolves to dictate his master's orders right there from the outside. He dictates in an imposing tone that for ignoring cultivation, causing chaos in the combat arena and accumulating complaints from other disciples. The young man was considered owner of a cruel heart, though he will be spared from the ultimate penalty due to his young age. Manhua is horrified to hear the absurd punishment that he must hand over the emerald gourd, destroy his own spiritual cultivation, lose an arm and a leg, and be expelled forever from the Kaoshan sect. Indignated by the audacity of the rival group, the young man questions if Wang Tengfei's orders have now come to be worth more than the very laws established by the sect. The messenger coldly replies that his leader's orders do indeed equal local laws, demanding that Meng Hao appear on his knees at the pill distribution plaza the next day to publicly apologize to Lu Hong and await his punishment. Without getting any more answers, Shangwen Song turns around and withdraws from the location, warning that his message has already been delivered. The crescent moon shines in the cloudy sky of that tense night, while the young cultivator finds himself facing an extremely delicate situation. Sitting on his stone bed, Meng Hao falls into despair and mentally repeats the same question without stopping, desperately trying to find a way out of that dead end. The idea of fleeing the sect begins to echo with great force in his mind as the only logical alternative to preserve his life and his cultivation. He walks slowly toward the stone portal of his shelter, still hesitating if total abandonment of the place is truly the best choice to make. Placing his hand on the cold stone entrance, he hesitates for a long moment while making a definitive decision about his destiny. The next day dawns and the young man finally steps out of his shelter with firm strides, indicating he decided to face the situation head-on. Leaning against a nearby tree, Shangwen Song watches him leave with disdain and comments that he showed himself less foolish than expected by not trying to run. Meng Hao replies with seriousness that he simply would not accept carrying the brand of a runaway traitor of the Kashan sect. The senior then advises him to show sincere regret and beg for Wang Tengfei's forgiveness, sarcastically suggesting that perhaps the leader will allow him to preserve at least one of his arms. Hearing that cruel mockery, an expression of deep, silent fury takes over Meng Hao's face. They begin to climb the monumental stone staircases of the sect, blending in with the other disciples who are also heading to the Grand Plaza. In the main courtyard, several students surround the charismatic and respected Wang Tengfei, asking for advice on their cultivation techniques and humbly thanking the master for his guidance. As Meng Hao advances alongside the messenger, the crowd around them opens a path, whispering with looks of pure suspicion and expectation. Meanwhile, a disciple tries to return a borrowed pill to Wang Tengfei, but the generous leader declines with friendliness and encourages him to use it to strengthen his cultivation until he reaches the 3rd level before worrying about returning it. However, Wang Tengfei's gentle facial expression changes instantly the moment he notices the arrival of the boy who challenged his band. With a cynical and superior smile on his lips, he extends his open hand toward Meng Hao and bluntly demands that the young man hand over the treasure stolen from his group. Meng Hao remains standing under the judging gaze of everyone, staring at that extended hand, which represents the imminence of a severe punishment. Without backing up a single step, the young man begins to state loudly that the official laws established by the Kashan sect itself are very clear regarding spoils and combat. He adds by categorically stating that any item won through one's own battle effort legitimately belongs to the victor, causing the messenger in the background to laugh and consider him a hopeless fool for not begging for mercy. Wang Tengfei just smirks with extreme arrogance, retorting that the emerald gourd is his property and belongs only to whomever he decides to grace with the gift. He emphasizes with arrogance that if he himself didn't the artifact to Meng Hao, the boy simply didn't have the authorization to keep it with him. Without wasting more time on debates, the powerful senior unleashes a sudden blast of energy that flies violently against the protagonist's chest. Meng Hao reacts quickly by crossing his arms and activating his protective pendant's magical barrier to contain the direct impact of the overwhelming blow. The leader of the rival group narrows his eyes in slight surprise to see that his initial attack was efficiently absorbed. He points his index finger once more with disdain and, in the blink of an eye, causes Menghua's sturdy jade defensive barrier to completely shatter in the air. The impact of the shield destruction generates a colossal crash that throws Menghua's body violently backward. The young man watches horrified as the pieces of his once excellent defense fall like glittering dust onto the stone floor of the courtyard. In an instant of pure agony, he realizes with enormous regret that the valuable defensive amulet Chu Kyung had gifted him was entirely destroyed with a single movement from the opponent, demonstrating an absolute and frightening control of energy. Wang Tengfei begins to trace circles with his index finger to prepare his next spell. A violent rush of air currents engulfs Menghua with full force, lifting his body into the air and making him spit fluids under the crushing pressure of the blow. The whirlwind of wind rips the coveted emerald gourd from inside the young man's robes, making it float freely in the midst of the energy chaos. Wang Tengfei catches the artifact back with ease in his palm, while coldly reminding him of the ultimatum that the boy's punishment must include the complete destruction of his spiritual cultivation. Under the relentless orders, streams of concentrated energy begin to twist violently around the young man's arms, but to sever them right then and there. The protagonist faces the coldness of the executioner, commanding his imminent physical mutilation and definitive expulsion from the entire sect territory. Suddenly, a massive crash cuts through the air, and a powerful explosion of energy abruptly interferes with the progress of the cruel punishment. Menghua plunges heavily onto his back against the slabs of the plaza floor, exhausted and severely wounded from the violent engagement. Before him appears the imposing figure of white-haired Elder Aoyang, who firmly intervenes in the dispute, telling Wang Tengfei that since he recovered the artifact, the matter must be closed without additional abuse. Though annoyed by the interruption, Wang Tengfei decides to back down as a sign of respect, complying with the direct order from the experienced sect elder. Under the watchful eyes of the entire crowd, the fearsome leader of the rival group turns around and calmly withdraws from the distribution courtyard, fallen and with his body covered in wounds and fluids. Menghua stares at the sky gloomily, while trying to catch his breath after the terrible humiliation. Around him, the other disciples watch him with a mix of mockery and indifference, noting the harsh reality of whoever challenges the sect's elite. Elder Aoyang just stares at the young man sprawled on the ground in complete silence, keeping his own thoughts about the injustice suffered by the boy in that courtyard. With great difficulty, Menghua tries to pull himself up from the stone floor, supporting himself on his knees while trying to handle the pain of his severe wounds. Under the silent gazes of the other disciples and Elder Aoyang, the young man stands up with his head lowered and presses his injured arm against his chest. He begins to walk down the sect's massive staircases alone, leaving behind the courtyard that was the stage for his worst defeat. Upon reaching the entrance of his home, he pushes the heavy stone door with the last strengths he has left. As soon as he enters his refuge, his completely weakened body can no longer take the effort, and he ends up tripping forward. The young man collapses face, first onto the cave's stone floor, completely unconscious after all the physical and mental toll of that day. Several days pass while Menghua's injured body remains motionless and in absolute silence on the gelid floor. On the 10th day of that painful recovery, soft and silent footsteps finally begin to echo at the entrance of the shelter. It is the beautiful and powerful Su Kyung who enters the room and finds the young man still knocked out in the middle of a puddle of dried fluids. She observes him with a serious and worried expression, silently revealing she only managed to come out of her seclusion the previous day. Su Kyung begins to channel her healing energy, while explaining that Wang Tengfei possesses mysterious and extremely influential origins outside the kingdom of Zhao itself. She lifts the protagonist's body with her wind magic, adding that the enemy has already reached the peak of the 6th cultivation level and is the primary candidate to be promoted to the sect's inner sector. As she lays him down with utmost care on the stone bed, she gently warns him about the extreme danger of provoking such a powerful an untouchable opponent at this time. Before stepping away, she leaves a new green object on the stone table and guarantees that if the rival band comes to bother him again, there is a way to handle the situation. She explains that he can break that amulet to alert her, even if she is in total seclusion, making Meng Hao thank her with a weak voice and ask how long it would normally take for someone at the 4th level to reach the legendary 7th tier. Xu Qing seriously replies that a person of ordinary talent would take between 10 and 30 years due to the terrible energy bottlenecks at the 4th and 6th levels, advising him to forget those foolish thoughts and just focus on resting. She silently withdraws from the location, leaving the young man lost in thought as he stares at the dark ceiling of the cave. Before completely vanishing into the darkness, her voice echoes, reminding him that the other companions who came on the same trip as him were also finally promoted from the chores sector, and it's up to Meng Hao to go get them as soon as he recovers, lying down and still weakened. Meng Hao's eyes shine with determination at the thought of reuniting with familiar faces from that time. Shortly after, the young man finally gets up from the bed and begins to walk back outside, with his robes still torn by the scars of battle. He pauses before his table to take one last look at the open pages of the book guiding his steps in that sect. The page displays the famous promise of the ancestral founder of the sect, who guarantees to be the supreme protector of any cultivator who decides to join his temple. With a look of pure resolution, the young man bites his own index finger to use his blood as ink. He passes his bloodied finger firmly over the ancient letters of the sacred text. Meng Hao scratches out the answer's promise and writes with his own blood that from that moment on, he will be his own and only protector. That is how a crucial chapter in the young cultivator's maturation closes, marking a definitive turn in his philosophy of survival. The scenery changes to beautiful mountains surrounded by orange-leaved trees, indicating the transition of seasons in the spiritual temple. With his hair tied in a high, neat ponytail, the young man makes his way down with a renewed posture. He calmly walks down the stone staircases, surrounded by the dense, low vegetation of the mountains. Suddenly, a loud and familiar voice echoes from afar, revealing chubby Ilafugua waving happily and shouting words of encouragement to his friend. The chubby guy says goodbye to his former colleagues, promising to always come back to visit them, triggering a reaction of absolute panic in the audience of disciples who beg for him to never return to that place. Meng Hao stares at the scene with an expression of total confusion, intrigued by the desperate and terrified reaction of all those cultivators. As they walk together, the chubby guy proudly tells that people kept asking to change rooms, claiming fear of disturbing his sleep, leaving Meng Hao in silence as he realizes his friend doesn't even suspect that his bizarre habit of grinding his teeth at night was everyone's true terror. Crossing the rope bridge over the canyon, the chubby guy runs excitedly toward the temple and calls the protagonist to proudly display his new spiritual treasure. Meng Hao looks confusedly at the small short sword held up by his friend, not understanding at first glance what could be so spectacular about that simple weapon. The chubby guy flashes a massive smile, displaying his sharp teeth, and excitedly explains he needed an extremely sturdy metal to manage to sharpen his continuously growing teeth. Meng Hao just nods his head in silence, recalling the destructive sleepwalking episodes in the sect and confirming that the young man's true talent really resides in his iron jaw. He offers the chubby guy the chance to share his rich spiritual cave, but feels relieved when his friend declines for the sake of his privacy, allowing Meng Hao to preserve the secret of his duplicating mirror. Days later, while meditating peacefully in the public courtyard, Meng Hao spots the chubby guy running excitedly toward him down the mountain staircases. Impressed by the business's revenue, the chubby guy praises his friend's commercial talent, who takes the opportunity to hire him as the official salesman for the public zone. Since he himself can no longer frequent the low-level area, time continues to run serenely through the majestic valleys and canyons of the Kaoshan sect. Beneath the canopies of dry-leafed trees, Meng Hao dedicates every free moment to his intense routine of meditation and spiritual cultivation. Even with the rigorous arrival of winter and the accumulation of snow around him, the young man remains completely motionless and focused on his progress. One day, the chubby guy suddenly appears in a hurry, dragging a timid young man by the arm and calls Menghua's attention to present the surprise. The young man acts bashful before the protagonist and makes an extremely respectful greeting, formally treating Manhua as senior brother. Manhua immediately recognizes young Xiaohu, who was taken along with them from their old village, and curiously asks about the fate of Wang Yukai, the fourth member of that fateful group. Xiaohu lowers his head in sadness and reveals the tragic news that their companion ended up losing his life, leaving Manhua and the chubby guy in a complete state of shock. He tells that in the basic chores sector, the late Yukai took on the heaviest burden to help him because he was younger until a terrible gust of wind threw him off a cliff, leaving only bone fragments consumed by wild beasts after months of searching. The chubby guy begins to cry from pure emotion and invites Xiaohu to stay under their protection from that moment on, guaranteeing that Menghua's strong presence will keep any attacker far away from him. To the surprise and confusion of the two friends, Xiaohu gently declines the generous offer with a formal greeting, stating he prefers to keep looking out for himself, and quickly withdraws from there. Young Xiaohu slowly walks away under the falling snow in the cold forest, leaving only a trail of silent footprints along the path. Lai Fugai scratches his head, not understanding anything, and asks what is wrong with the boy, while Menghua just watches him leave in absolute silence. The protagonist ponders that everyone keeps their own secrets, and that Xiaohu must have had some fortunate encounter to dare enter the outer sector at only the first level, while 3 months quickly pass, completing an entire year since Menghua's arrival at the Kaoshan sect. On the day of the pill distribution, a crowd of disciples whispers tenses about the recent passing of the Grand Elder at 108 years old, fearing that the loss of such a strong pillar will make the sect an easy target for invaders from other sects, who are lurking around the borders. Concerned, Menghua asks if the deceased elder would be the kind Aoyang who saved him in the courtyard, but his chubby friend guarantees, while sharpening his dagger on his teeth, that it certainly wasn't him. A nearby disciple asks about Menghua's breakthrough, who admits he is facing a terrible block in his evolution, causing the chubby guy to joke that it's only fair since his friend was evolving too fast for others to keep up. In silence, he recalls Shu Qing's advice about blocks after the 4th stage and wonders if the excessive use of beast cores sped up this barrier, concluding he will need special pills or the core of a higher-tier monster to overcome it. Lai Fugai offers to buy more ordinary pills with the shop's profits, but Menghua declines because they no longer have any effect on him, while everyone's attention is diverted by the imposing arrival of Elder Shangguan Xiu to preside over the distribution. The elder displays a glittering and coveted golden pill on the palm of his hand, immediately drawing every greedy eye in the courtyard. Menghua's eyes widen, and he begins to break into a cold sweat as he recognizes the nature of that precious item from afar. That is another legendary arid spirit pill, famous for being extremely valuable and rare throughout the entire region. The disciples begin to whisper excitedly, commenting that the elder distributes only a single unit of this treasure per year due to its priceless value. Menghua stares at the golden shine with total determination, knowing that obtaining that resource would be the perfect key to finally breaking his cultivation block. Shangguan Shu demands total silence from the noisy crowd and begins to give a speech about the rules of his distributions over the last 2 years. In the midst of the eager crowd, the arrogant Wang Tengfei remains standing, maintaining his usual cold posture of total superiority. The elder explains that he has always preferred to encourage newly promoted young people in the sect because the future and prosperity of the temple depend directly on the rise of new talents. Menghua listens to the speech with surprise, never imagining that the speaker's eyes are about to lock in his direction. By his side, chubby Lai Fugui remains distracted, happily biting his small short metal sword. With a quick flick of his finger, the elder fires a bright beam of light toward the audience, announcing the lucky winner who will receive the grand prize. To everyone's absolute astonishment, the valuable golden pill travels through the air and lands right into the chubby guy's trembling hands. Lifugui completely panics as he holds the glittering object, cursing in fear without understanding why he of all people ended up chosen to receive that deadly gift. Desperate, he begs for Menghao's help in tears, knowing that carrying that treasure in the middle of dozens of wolves is the same as signing his own death warrant. Before they can come up with a plan, violence explodes in the courtyard when a senior brutally assaults another disciple to clear a path. Extremely strong cultivators with threatening expressions begin to advance toward the chubby guy with bloodthirsty looks. Without hesitating for his own safety, Lifugui quickly tosses the golden pill toward Menghao's extended hand. Menghao grabs the prize and orders his friend to run immediately to hide in his own cultivation shelter while he himself handles the pursuers. Upon recognizing the new bearer of the treasure, the attackers shout furiously that Menghao is only at the 4th power level and won't manage to escape the circle of dozens of hungry seniors. Protagonist turns around and dashes at high speed up the mountain staircases, dodging and nimbly leaping over the first opponents who try to stop him. Fallen on the ground to play along, the chubby guy begins to cry dramatically, pointing upward, pretending to everyone that Menghao just assaulted him and stole his precious pill. A true horde of enraged cultivators charges up the staircases right behind Menghao, yelling threats and demanding the immediate delivery of the valuable golden prize. Alone and distressed in the plaza, Lifugui covers his face with his hands and prays fervently that his loyal companion manages to come out of that insane pursuit unharmed. Menghao mentally calculates that he only needs to protect the pill for 12 hours for its seal to expire so he can consume it. But realizing he is at a disadvantage against 5th-level pursuers, he makes the drastic decision to seek refuge in the feared and dangerous Black Mountain. He smiles confidently, remembering that this region, heavily populated by furry beasts, is the perfect territory for the ruthless use of his backside. Bursting bronze mirror. The hunt reaches a new level of tension as the young cultivator dives, without fear, toward the heart of the forbidden forest. The pursuers break, startled upon noticing the boy's rote, commenting incredulously that he must have lost his mind to enter Black Mountain, where he will certainly be devoured by monsters in less than an hour. However, moved by pure greed not to let the pill be consumed by any wild creature, they decide to risk everything and continue the pursuit deep into the forest. As they cross the threshold of the first dark, trunked trees characteristic of the forbidden region, one of the warriors spots something strange on the ground and halts his steps. Before them appears the sprawled corpse of a gigantic demonic tiger, showing a bloody and bizarre burst wound right on its backside. The pursuers are horrified to find that the beast was level 3, and that Menghao still had the coolness to extract its spiritual core before continuing his flight. A little further ahead, they find 3 more large wild beasts taken down in exactly the same mysterious way, making them question how a mere 4th-level newcomer would be capable of such a feat in so little time. Shangwen's song begins to break into a cold sweat out of pure dread upon realizing the boy's hidden strength, pondering that he would have been crushed if Menghao had fought with everything during their previous confrontation at the cultivation shelter. Experienced warriors Zhou Kai and Yin Tianlong, both consolidated at the fearsome 5th level, agree there is something extremely bizarre about the protagonist and that they need to act fast in that hostile area. Both exchange looks filled with mutual suspicion, with each secretly planning to capture the spirit pill before the other manages to lay hands on it. In the blink of an eye, the 2 rivals dash through the thick woods in a deadly race to catch the runaway boy's trail. Sensing the swift approach of his pursuers, Menghao draws his glittering bronze mirror and prepares to act. He points the artifact toward a group of furry wild boars blocking his path, firing a shine that makes the beasts flee in total panic. He satisfiedly concludes that using the mirror's light just to startle and scare away the monsters is much faster and more efficient than bursting them, helping him save energy and gain ground against the encirclement. Suddenly, two flying swords cross the air close to his body and drive into the ground, forcing the boy to perform a nimble backward acrobatic flip so as not to get impaled. He twists in mid-air with extreme precision to escape another sharp gust of cutting wind advancing in his direction. The attacker's deadly silver blade passes scraping by, officially starting the definitive confrontation for possession of the coveted golden pill deep within Black Mountain. Manhua steps firmly on his flying sword to initiate an impressive movement. He glides at high speed through the forest, while the two pursuers watch him from afar. The enemies are shocked to see the fourth-level youth apparently flying on a sword. Actually, he only uses spiritual energy to propel the weapon and glide through the air with it. The pursuers find the move foolish for wasting a lot of energy, while the boy consumes pills. Manhua realizes he needs to get much stronger to stop Wang's band from bothering him. Zhou Kai leaps down from the trees, using his fire technique to demand the delivery of the item. Meanwhile, Yin Tianlong points his finger and sends his own flying sword to the attack. The large dragon of flames and the deadly sword charge fiercely against the fleeing youth. To the rival's total surprise, Manhua summons 10 flying swords all at once. The protagonist makes a hand sign and coldly orders all weapons to detonate at once. A series of colossal and destructive explosions engulfs the two warriors head-on. The men don't believe he destroyed 10 swords and vow to finish him at the next opportunity. Half an hour passes and another massive explosion of flames cuts through the silence of the dense forest. 1 hour later, the golden glow of the pill temporarily reveals the youth's location. At 1 hour and 30 minutes of flight, another large sword detonation drives back the enemies in the woods. The rivals are exasperated that he has already exploded more than 30 swords without hesitation. They run exhausted and wonder where so much energy comes from to continue that flight. Suddenly, a monstrous lupine beast emerges from the shadows and attacks Zhou Kai by surprise. He smashes the wolf with a punch and complains that the monsters only attack the pursuing duo. Surrounded by beasts, they decide to clear the path before going after the young master. Manhua celebrates using the mirror to make the monsters attack only his rivals. However, he worries about the immense amount of creatures that could generate a riot. A deafening and terrifying roar echoes throughout the mountain, startling the boy. He realizes the sound doesn't come from an ordinary monster and suspects the presence of a demon king. Several demonic apes surround the protagonist, with their eyes shining in the darkness. The bronze mirror on Menghao's chest begins to glow intensely automatically. One of the large beasts roars furiously upon being struck by the mystic reflection of the artifact. He desperately wonders if the mirror only angered the beasts due to their thick fur. Noticing they have no fear, he decides he will need to burst the group to survive. But the boy hesitates with a smile on his face upon realizing he can use the apes to his advantage. In another part of the woods, Shanglin Song defeats a wild bear with a precise sword slash. He notices the danger of the tide of beasts and considers retreating since he stands no chance against his rivals. Suddenly, Manhua comes flying through the skies and shouts the senior's name with enthusiasm. The youth says he brought the band of apes under their orders and asks them to attack quickly. Manhua throws more of his swords toward the enemies and orders them all to explode. The massive detonation hits the warriors while they curse against the youth's trickery. Satisfied, the boy runs and plans to keep the fourth-level warriors busy with the apes. However, the furious shout of the fifth-level leaders echoes, showing they have already broken free. Knowing the disadvantage, he decides to venture even deeper into the dangerous mountain. The dark and silent night is illuminated only by the imposing glow of the full moon in the sky. Several demonic beasts begin to roar frighteningly deep within the forest. The monsters' terrible roars begin to spread throughout the entire expanse of the mountain. The sounds of fury multiply in the air, showing that the forest is in complete turmoil. Hundreds of wild claimers cover the darkness, revealing a collective fury out of control. The enemies stand exhausted surrounded by corpses, and blame Meng Hao for that total madness. They theorize that the boy manages to influence the beast's emotions to create that chaos. One of them suggests giving up the hunt, but the other furiously refuses because he desires the valuable pill. While the rivals argue, the scene changes back to the tense silence of the tree canopies. Meng Hao spots something surprising in the forest and stands paralyzed with astonishment at what he sees. Before the youth appears a gigantic mystical creature, covered in dark scales, that exudes an intimidating presence. He stands completely paralyzed upon, coming face to face with an immense black serpent, roaring against the mountain rocks. The youth notices that the terrifying monster seems to be agonizing in pain, while twisting violently on the spot. Analyzing the situation closely, he notices trails of old skin and deduces the creature is in the process of shedding its skin. The colossal serpent opens its gigantic mouth and lets out another terrible roar that makes the whole region shake hard. He feels the spiritual energy dispersing and recognizes that sound as the same clamor that frightened the other monsters. Meng Hao remembers that serpents grow weak during skin shedding and deduces this painful process has already lasted years. Suddenly, the impact of the roar's sound hits the boy head-on, causing him to spit fluids due to the heavy pressure. Startled by the internal damage, he concludes that this monster's power level far surpasses the 7th or 9th stage. Decided to flee to save his life, the boy prepares to turn back but notices something unusual stuck in the monster. His eyes widen as he spots the hilt of a mystical flying sword driven deeply into the creature's back. The youth theorizes that this ancient weapon must be a legendary treasure for managing to injure such a powerful being in the past. Meng Hao slaps his own face to drive away greed and focus on the fact that he cannot risk his life with that beast. Without wasting more time on dangerous thoughts, he begins to run quickly away from that deadly hiding spot. A few hours pass and the tired steps of his pursuers finally find him meditating on a rock. The rivals mock his fatigue, but the protagonist simply consumes a pill and claims to be fully recovered. The duo of warriors grows frustrated upon realizing they themselves spent all their resources on the long hunt. Furious, Jokai demands that the boys stop running and using monster tricks to face them on equal terms. With mockery, Meng Hao retorts that he will keep using the local beasts to play hide and seek if they decide to pursue him. He displays the prize and warns that the seal's time is almost at an end and that he will use the item to reach the 5th power level. The rivals stand completely speechless and trembling with pure rage at the young cultivator's relentless audacity. Seeing there is no other way out, Zhou Kai turns around and warns that the band will settle that score as soon as they return. Yin Tianlong tries to falsely change his tone and congratulates him on the advance, wishing they become good friends in the future. Meng Hao just observes the fake warrior's awkward departure toward the sect's path in complete silence. Relieved by the end of the pursuit, he collapses onto the rock exhausted, joking that he almost lost his pill shop on the trip. Half an hour later, a colossal golden glow explodes in the skies, marking the definitive breaking of the resource's magical seal. With a massive smile of satisfaction, the protagonist holds the precious prize, now completely free for direct consumption. Before ingesting it, he draws his bronze mirror and decides to use it to try to achieve something that will change his destiny. Meng Hao places all his spiritual stones around the artifact in the hope of duplicating that valuable treasure. To his extreme joy, the mirror shines and creates 10 identical copies of the pill, making all the effort worth it. Determined, the boy holds one of the golden spheres and declares he will finally reach the long-dreamed 5th power level. In another spot of the mountains, the proud Wang Tengfei celebrates the imminent conclusion of his years of searching for the legendary dragon. He observes his intersect amulet and plans his next steps toward the legendary foundation establishment stage. A subordinate informs him that the preparations are done, leaving only the absence of the messenger Shangwen Song on the team. The leader disdains the alley's lack and reinforces that he sacrificed his entire fortune to attack the beast at its weakest moment. He displays conviction in his victory and recalls the landmark moment of his childhood that traced his grand destiny. The youth recalls the day a drop of fluids fell on his right arm, starting his dreams of being a supreme ruler. Thanks to this divine heritage, he was able to decipher ancient texts and track the exact location of the great dragon's corpse. With everything ready, he orders the group to start the expedition toward the depths of the Forbidden Mountain early the next morning. Back at Manhua's shelter, the golden spheres float, glowing intensely in the darkness of his spiritual cave. The youth quickly consumes the pills to absorb their dense torrent of energy without losing a single second of progress. With only a few units of the precious resource left, the boy focuses his entire mind to break the magical barrier. Absolute silence takes over the location at the exact moment his internal energy hits the bottleneck's limit. A massive explosion of spiritual energy expands and elevates the boy's soul to a new level of cosmic perception. The protagonist opens his eyes in his mind and notices he is floating over a beautiful lake of calm, crystal, clear waters. He realizes the lake is located at his energy center, confirming his successful advance to the 5th stage. As he walks on the water, he understands the future bottlenecks that transform this reservoir into a spiritual sea. He stares at his own reflection in the water, aware that consolidating this foundation will free him forever from the fragile mortal body. Excited by the advance, he celebrates being able to learn the wind steps technique to raise his mobility to a new tier. However, his moment of celebration is abruptly broken when a monstrous roar echoes, shaking the cave. He notices the serpent's roar exudes urgency and panic and resolves to approach from afar to investigate what happened. Upon arriving, he spots Wang Tengfei leading a coordinated attack of magical swords against the gigantic black beast. The youth is surprised to notice his rival there and understands the band wasn't after him, but rather the great serpent. Wang Tengfei displays a proud smile and channels his immense magical energy through gestures with his index fingers. Several bright blades are conjured in the air and fire at high speed in the direction of the forest's massive monster. The powerful magical weapons hit the serpent's skin head-on, triggering violent explosions of light and sparks in the woods. Other skilled warriors advance in a coordinated manner, wielding their daggers to corner the weakened beast. Manhua recognizes some high-level seniors on the team, including the influential and respected elder Shangwan Shu. The gigantic mystical creature twists in pain under the violent and relentless onslaught of the elite band of cultivators. The protagonist secretly roots for the monster to manage to devour the rival band and avenge his previous humiliation. Wang Tengfei raises his left hand and loudly orders the immediate activation of a massive magical formation in the sky. A colossal mystical circle filled with blue lightning appears above the cliff, engulfing the entire scenery in pure electricity. The serpent roars furiously while trying to resist the terrible storm of electrical discharges hitting its body. Under the heavy mystical pressure, the glittering blue silhouette of an ancestral dragon begins to project above the creature. The charismatic leader stares at the revelation of the dragon's spirit with a look of extreme ambition and total arrogance in his eyes. In a few moments, the imposing spiritual projection begins to disintegrate and vanish into the air like glittering dust. The warriors celebrate noticing the mystical image vanished, showing the beast can no longer use that strength. The beast lets out one last deafening clamor, while a great amount of smoke and debris covers the entire mountain slope. The reptile's dark silhouette twists, bizarrely amid the dense spiritual fog emerging on the spot. The great monster, now renewed, majestically floats in the night sky, displaying its fearsome glowing red eyes. The creature opens its gigantic mouth and blows a dense curtain of reddish, toxic fog against the attackers. The leader alerts everyone to dodge the mist and celebrates because he knows the beast's skin-shedding process is concluded. Confident, he smiles realizing the desired mystical treasure of the monster is finally within reach of his hands. Manhua observes the beast fly and notices the mysterious ancient sword is no longer stuck in the serpent's new body, The boy astutely deduces that the valuable weapon must have been left behind along with the discarded old skin carcass. With a serious look, he vows to silence the enemy's arrogance, proving he is not a mere insect that can be stepped on. Without hesitation, the youth begins to run at high speed toward the location where the skin carcass was discarded. He uses all his physical strength to scale the steep crags under the silver light of the forest's night sky. Moved by pure haste, the boy dives without fear into a dark fissure located at the heart of the large stone cliff. He advances with care, squeezing through the narrow and damp crevices of the forbidden mountain's secret passage. Upon finding the carcass, the youth removes the valuable sword and flees quickly before the band notices his intrusion. Shortly after, Wang Tengfei lands triumphantly before the large cave, celebrating finally reaching his goal. Before him appears the imposing petrified carcass of an immense Chinese dragon resting in the depths of the darkness. He walks slowly, explaining that he needed to wait for the beast's skin shedding to manage to enter there safely. The charismatic leader makes a respectful bow before an ancient mummified body resting near the treasure. Upon searching the area for the storage amulet and the mystical jewel, he falls into shock at finding absolutely nothing. Wang Tengfei falls into complete despair and shouts, looking for the ancient sword that should be alongside the debris. He activates the mystical blood mark on his right arm, trying to track the energy signature of the valuable relic. The powerful youth widens his eyes in a complete state of shock upon realizing an intruder stole his grand prize. He stares with horror at the mark of the recent cut on the fossilized dragon's skull, where the mystical item used to rest. The youth analyzes the open fissure and desperately realizes the creature's valuable internal core was also taken away. Consumed by an overwhelming fury, the leader fires out of the cave toward the skies in search of the culprit. Floating above the tree canopies, he shouts furiously, demanding to know who dared steal his relic of so many decades. A massive, bluish ghostly projection of his wrath manifests in the skies, while he bellows with all his strength. In safety, the protagonist opens a smile from ear to ear, celebrating his massive and valuable victory that night. He glides swiftly on his sword, while hearing his rival's distant shouts of fury echoing throughout the dark mountain. Upon entering his safe shelter, the youth collapses onto the floor exhausted, but anxious to check all his new belongings. The first object he pulls out is a beautiful and glittering mystical storage bag decorated with golden details. He deduces the item belonged to the legendary warrior of the past, and curiously prepares to uncover its entire content. With enormous expectation, the young master opens the golden ribbon and extends his hand to examine the interior of the valuable artifact. He examines one of the stones from the storage bag and stands shocked to realize there are more than 2,000 rare pieces in there. Trembling with excitement, he tries to calm down, thinking of the immense duplication power he will have using his bronze mirror. The boy pulls some simple and ordinary clothes from the ancient warrior, discarding them shortly after onto the stone floor. Next, he analyzes the legendary mystical core of the ancestral dragon, considering the idea of creating some duplicates of it. However, as he brings the core close to the mirror, the object's handle suddenly heats up, burning the palm of his hand. The mystical mirror begins to float on its own, pulling the protagonist's hand with a strong and mysterious force. The bronze artifact suddenly clashes against the ancient wooden sword the boy had rescued from the cliff. A strong torrent of bright beams and explosions of light takes over the entire shelter, generating a massive impact in the room. Concerned about his new belongings, Manhua makes hand signs trying to order his magical mirror to return quickly. He collects the mystical core and notes, confusedly, that its outer shell cracked after the violent impact of energy that occurred. Peeling away the surface, he reveals a beautiful and glittering red jewel that exudes high-density spiritual vapor. The boy stands impressed upon feeling the immense and overwhelming concentrated energy emanating from that small mystical jewel. Concentrating on the last remaining item, the young master analyzes the intriguing golden lines of the wooden sword. Even being made entirely of wood, the blade shows itself extremely sharp indicating a great hidden origin. He notes with intrigue that the mystical object is automatically sucking all the spiritual energy from his home's spring. Curious about the absorption capacity, he decides to bring a glittering spiritual stone close to perform a practical test. In a few seconds, the mystical energy of the green stone is entirely sucked by the blade, leaving only dull dust. Seeing the stone dry up, he realizes he can use that incredible ability to weaken rivals during fights. At that moment, the mirror vibrates again, and the boy begs for the object to calm down even if the weapon has no fur. Sitting on his knees on the floor, he positions the artifacts side by side and decides to start the great duplication process. The youth wonders with concern how many stones from his new treasure will be consumed to copy that legendary weapon. He firmly positions the wooden sword on the polished surface of his valuable bronze mirror on the floor. A strong mystical crash occurs the instant the blade comes into direct contact with the sacred object's reflection. To his total amazement, the mystical sword simply disappears from the floor, making the youth accuse the mirror of theft. Trying to maintain his calm, he wonders if that sudden disappearance is just the initial stage of the copying process. To test his theory, he resolves to place a single green stone on the reflection and observes the object get absorbed right away. Consumed by a comical fury, the boy realizes the artifact is extremely greedy and gluttonous for spiritual stones. Noticing the colossal amount of resources demanded, he regrets his boldness and begs the mirror for mercy. The protagonist's dramatic crying continues as more numbers appear, demanding almost his entire new wealth. He realizes that if he interrupts the process now, he will lose all the resources already invested without getting anything back. After swallowing Manhua's 2,000 precious stones, the mirror finally releases an overwhelming flash of light in the area. Tired of so much stress, the boy stares at the immense and unprecedented storm of brightness with an expression of total indifference. The mysterious pillar of bright flames remains active and illuminating the entire cave for a long period of time. About half an hour later, the great storm of light finally subsides, revealing the final result of that madness. Before him rest two identical wooden swords, confirming the success of the very expensive duplication process. The youth collapses onto the floor, laughing and crying at the same time over the painful loss of all his beloved 2,000 coins. He deeply laments the loss of his newly acquired fortune, but decides to focus his attention on the red jewel that remained, seeking compensation to ease his pain. The boy decides it is the perfect moment to consume the dragon's core. The youth ponders his recent advance to the 5th level and wonders how far his cultivation will go upon swallowing the jewel. Without hesitation, he places the bright red sphere in his mouth and swallows it, releasing an immense internal torrent of energy. The precious artifact sinks deeply until it hits the quiet surface of his beautiful and glittering spiritual lake. A brief moment of absolute silence and calm takes over his entire internal energy center after the impact. Suddenly, a monumental explosion of mystical waters rises violently, triggering a massive stir in his body. The waves of pure spiritual energy advance with full force, colossally expanding the limits of his cultivation. An overwhelming and unstoppable torrent of power flows through his entire being, marking the breaking of another great bottleneck in the sect. Enveloped by a dense curtain of dark smoke, the protagonist remains motionless on the stone bed, focused on his advance. The boy surpasses all limits and successfully reaches the intermediate stage of the 6th power tier. A few days pass and the boy continues meditating in silence with his body covered in impurities expelled from cultivation. Slowly, the young master's eyes begin to open, revealing a shine of pure determination and renewed power. He stands up with a firm posture, preparing for the new challenges awaiting him on his journey through the Caution sect. He walks through the cave, leaving a trail of black grime that drained from his purified body during cultivation. The youth splashes plenty of fresh water onto his face to quickly clean the residues and impurities from his skin. Totally clean, he looks at himself surprised to notice that his appearance now exudes an impressive spiritual vigor and beauty. Analyzing the grime on the bed, He understands he reached the 6th level, where energy cleanses his muscles and marrow. The protagonist notes that his hair grew quite a bit, and that his body now feels incredibly light and nimble. He satisfiedly reflects that being at the 6th level, very few disciples in the sect will manage to intimidate him from today on. The youth stretches happily, celebrating the fact of having stolen that great opportunity directly from Wang Tengfei. Meanwhile, a kneeling subordinate reports to Wang Tengfei the results of his secret investigation on the mountain. He reveals that only Han Zong and Meng Hao were near the location, making the leader question who this Meng Hao guy is. The henchman explains that Meng Hao was the one responsible for defeating Lu Hong, triggering a quick memory of that confrontation. Upon hearing that name, Wang Tengfei grows furious on his golden throne, with his teeth clenched in pure hatred for the youth. He looks at his own wrist and notes with horror that the mystical blood mark has completely vanished from his skin. Consumed by fury, he vows to cut the thief into 1,000 pieces for stealing the entire heritage of his grand destiny. In the midst of his fit of rage, the young leader bluntly orders the subordinate to immediately withdraw from his presence. The henchman complies, startled, quickly leaving and closing the large, decorated wooden door of the sumptuous palace. Alone, the leader plans to reverse the magical formation to track the thief's energy even if it damages his own body. He makes a hand sign with his index finger and initiates the dangerous reversal spell of the massive energy matrix. The large mystical seal of blue light appears in the air, spinning in the opposite direction to start the mystical tracking. The storm of energy dissipates through the sect's night sky, sending out the mystical search beams throughout the entire region. Back at the shelter, the protagonist wakes up abruptly with a look of pure shock and surprise stamped on his face. He quickly sits up on the stone bed, sighing in relief to think that entire sensation was just a dream. On the outside, chubby Fuga burns ritual papers in front of the cave, crying and begging for the ghost's help. Meng Hao emerges from the shadows, slapping his friend's head, and angrily complains about him acting as if he were dead. Relieved, the chubby guy hugs him, crying with joy to discover his loyal companion survived the terrifying hunt. Fuguai falls into absolute shock upon noting his friend reached the 6th power tier, comparing him to an immortal being. The youth asks for modesty, commenting he is still far from Sukyun, but the chubby guy just excitedly asks if he already knows how to fly. To demonstrate his progress, Meng Hao channels his spiritual energy and makes his own feet levitate off the ground. He floats smoothly for a few moments before landing back lightly onto the mountain's rocky ground. He humbly admits he is still learning the wind steps technique, but his friend remains dazzled. Decided to test his true limit, the youth draws his mystical wooden sword and makes a gesture to command it. In the blink of an eye, he takes off, cutting through the skies on the blade while Fugoi watches him from down there in complete ecstasy. High up, the protagonist surprisingly notices that an ancient and mysterious incantation echoed in his own mind. A series of ancient, glowing golden mystical runes floats in his vision, revealing an ancestral secret. Guided by that instinct, he performs a quick sequence of magical gestures with both hands to test the spell. The movement creates an immense cutting vacuum blade that swiftly advances and severs several gigantic trees in the forest. He stares at his own right hand, shocked to realize that the cutting attack did not come from the ordinary wind steps technique. Down there, Fuga jumps with joy with his eyes shining, celebrating that now no one else will dare intimidate the duo. The chubby guy then warns about the start of registration for the awaited inner sect promotion test of the temple. He comments that the tournament was made for Wang Tengfei and jokes that it would be hilarious if his friend beat him in the showdown. Meng Hao ponders that defeating his rival would be great, but fears his too rapid evolution will attract unwanted attention. Decided, he asks to see the ransacked business, while at another point, Wang Tengfei spits fluids in his fit of fury. Through his mystical tracking spell, the leader detects a second presence and despairs, trying to decipher the author. 20 days pass, and in the courtyard, the disciples tensely whisper about the closing of the registration deadline for the grand tournament. Others complain that the current tests have become simple arena duels, while a warrior demands respect for the rules. In the midst of the movement, chubby Fugai runs, happily celebrating the immense profits the business has been generating in the plaza. Manhua celebrates the profits and reveals having created dozens of flying swords, disguising them so as not to attract attention. He interrupts his thoughts upon spotting an intriguing decorated yellow paper amulet pinned to a youth's robes. It is the powerful 6th-level warrior Henzong, who warns that the influential elder Shangguan is looking for the youth. Concerned, the boy recalls that the elder participated in the hunt for the monster and fears he suspects his intrusion. Upon arriving at the sect's imposing main temple, the protagonist is authorized to enter the room to begin the meeting. Manhua enters the grand hall and pays his respects, bowing before powerful martial Uncle Shangguan. Suddenly, the elder fires an extremely fast object with the tips of his fingers in the direction of the young disciple. The needle flies, cutting through the air in a trail of bright light, and quickly returns to the experienced elder's hands. The old man closely examines the needle with a drop of the boy's fluids to analyze his true divine essence. He claims not to smell celestial treasures and curtly orders the boy to hand over his bag. Shangguan holds the ordinary storage bag in his hands and stands in absolute silence, evaluating the object. Manhua asks what he seeks, knowing his valuable items were left safely with the chubby guy. The elder demands to know the reason for his rapid evolution, and the youth invents that he received pills from his protectors. A lackey returns from searching the hero's cave and warns that he found absolutely nothing suspicious over there. The elder listens to the report with a suspicious and annoyed look for not managing to find any proof. The protagonist feigns concern while humbly calling for the master in an attempt to disarm him. Shangguan makes a gesture of disdain and bluntly orders that the youth also withdraw from his presence right then. The young master leaves the temple and walks hurriedly among the trees to get away from that dangerous place. Alone in the hall, the elder thoughtfully observes the small metallic needle he used to collect Menghao's fluids. In a bizarre manner, the fearsome old man places the needle on his own tongue to directly taste the boy's fluids. He widens his eyes in complete shock and horror upon feeling the revealing taste of that powerful divine sample. Fearing the worst, the young master uses all his speed to escape from there, flying quickly on his sword. Upon landing, he finds chubby Fugui, who was dying of worry over his friend's disappearance. The chubby guy hands the true storage bag to the hero and anxiously asks how the conversation went. Manhua warns that the elder suspects him, and both try to come up with an urgent escape plan. The protagonist senses an imminent danger and grabs the chubby guy by the collar to flee from there right away. They get onto the sword, and the youth desperately reveals that the terrifying Shangguan Xiu is already pursuing them. Flying fast through the skies, the furious elder advances, determined to capture the two runaways in the woods. The old man notices that the boy's fluids exude the energy of hundreds of consumed cores. He wonders how the boy obtained so many cores and concludes that he hides a very valuable secret. Meanwhile, the other disciples of the sect walk peacefully through the village streets without noticing the confusion. Suddenly, Manhua passes flying like a flash above everyone, startling the youths in the courtyard. Right after, the elder appears flying in hot pursuit, and the force of his wind knocks the disciples to the ground. The disciples surprise, gossip upon seeing that, and say Manhua is a goner for provoking the elder. Fugai warns that the enemy is approaching, but the hero says his spiritual energy won't last long. The chubby guy suggests being left behind, but the protagonist refuses, knowing the villain would finish him in the blink of an eye. Faced with the dead end, the hero decides the only way is to go flying to a specific location. They land and begin to climb the staircases, running desperately while the elder observes them right behind. The villain stares at the two climbing the steps and begins to suspect the boy's escape plan. Upon reaching the top of the staircase, the protagonist raises his hand and shouts with all his strength to draw attention. He loudly declares that he wishes to sign up for the Intersect qualification tournament. The villain lands right behind, furious, while the terrified chubby guy decides to raise his hand too. The elder recognizes that the boy was clever to seek shelter in the tournament rules, but vows he won't escape. The temple examiner orders that the two stay there without leaving until the start of the tournament, which will happen in 2 days. The master examines Menghao's cultivation and stands extremely surprised to note that he has already reached the 6th level. The person in charge directs the boys to sign the registration book and to wait at the location without permission to leave. With the registration signed, the boy lets out a sarcastic smile of relief for being temporarily saved. The elder stares at the boy from afar with a look of pure hatred, mentally promising to end the insolent guy's life. Unable to violate the temple rules before the examiner, the furious old man decides to turn around and leave. The protagonist knows there is no turning back, while the chubby guy desperately cries for having signed up for the participation. Manhua reflects that he will only truly be safe if he wins the competition and becomes an Intersect disciple. The boy turns thoughtfully, knowing that the only way to obtain this special qualification demands an incredible feat. He observes the arrogant Wang Tengfei, who silently meditates at the location, awaiting the start of the tournament. The book reveals only the first 2 registrants on the sheet, showing the inevitable confrontation that will come. A short time later, new names appear registered on the list, including Lai Fuga and the experienced warrior Han Zong. Han Zong warns that Meng Hao is doomed for offending Shangwen, and that the tournament will be the day of his downfall. While the rivals observe seriously, Chubby Fugly desperately cries, fearing the worst for the duo. New and powerful names emerge on the tournament list, revealing that the competition will be much tighter. More dangerous warriors sign up for the dispute and leave the climate even tenser before the start. The protagonist realizes that the new rivals were sent by Elder Shangwen to hunt him down in the arena. 2 days pass and a large crowd gathers, eager to watch the duels of the 8 candidates. The imposing examiner raises his index finger and authoritatively announces that the tournament hour has arrived. The master channels his immense green energy to give the official start to the sex-awaited event. He dictates the severe rules and reveals the initial confrontations that will place the fighters face to face. The elder points to the ground and orders that the large combat arena rise before everyone present. Immense rocks begin to shake and violently rise, generating a great crash throughout the entire plaza. The stone blocks fit together perfectly to mold the imposing floating structure for duels. A colossal circular arena majestically appears in the skies, surrounded by mist and under the audience's attentive gaze. The examiner gives the start signal, declaring that the first combat will be between number 1 and number 8. The first warrior takes a firm step and lands onto the stone ground of the floating platform. The arrogant Wang Tengfei appears with his elegant posture, drawing gasps and praise from the audience. His opponent of number 8 begins to break into a cold sweat out of pure dread upon realizing whom he will face in the arena. Faced with Wang Tengfei's overwhelming presence, the rival immediately forfeits, without even trying to fight. He makes a humble bow, wishing the leader good luck. While the audience complains about the quick forfeit, the judge decrees Wang's victory and announces that the second confrontation will place number 2 against number 7. The warrior of number 7 climbs into the arena, wielding his sharp sword with a cold and threatening look. Meng Hao advises the terrified Fu Guai to step up and declare a forfeit at that exact instant to protect himself. The chubby guy climbs up, trembling with fear, and raises his hand, trying to shout to the judge that he forfeits the match. But the cruel opponent charges like a flash, without giving time for Fu Guai to manage to finish his sentence. The enemy's blade passes scraping by and lightly cuts the neck of the youth, who desperately screams in dread. The chubby guy is thrown off the combat platform while holding his lightly bleeding neck. Meng Hao catches his friend in the air, while the chubby guy continues crying and shouting that he forfeits the fight. The protagonist stares at the attacker with pure fury, realizing that the attack was cowardly and meant to do serious harm. The judge ignores the cowardly aggression and announces the start of the third battle between numbers 3 and 6. Hanzong threatens Menghao, saying that he and the chubby guy won't leave there alive after offending the elder. The youth thinks that even his great rival Wang Tengfei is better for having pride and not attacking the weak. In the audience, the other students whisper, saying Menghao is crazy for provoking the strongest elders. In the arena, number 6 forfeits right away, knowing Hanzong is an ally of the fearsome sect elder. The judge summons the last confrontation of the round, bringing Menghao to face a giant with an axe. The opponent activates a special gigantism technique to increase in size and intimidate the boy. The colossal warrior stares at Menghao with arrogance, believing he will crush the protagonist without effort. Hanzong confidently watches, believing that the 5th-level opponent will be the end of the hero's journey. The hero remains in complete silence, and with a calm posture that irritates the giant of the mountain, the giant leaps, delivering a deadly blow with his heavy axe directly against the youth's head. Without moving a single finger, the hero makes his mystical flying sword appear to block the heavy attack. The giant's weapon hits the young master's spiritual barrier while he plans his counter-attack. The enemy stares at the boy with disdain, thinking that simple defense won't last long in the fight. Menghao notices the opponent's defensive shield and decides to raise the fight's strength by snapping his fingers. A true shower of light swords appears in the skies and ruthlessly advances against the giant. The hero coldly whispers the magical word to activate his weapons. Detonation over the rival. A monumental explosion of dust and flames engulfs the colossal warrior, blocking his entire vision. In the midst of the chaos, an extremely swift blade cuts the opponent's neck in a clean and decisive manner. The giant collapses lifelessly in the arena, while the protagonist observes him with a gelid look of victory. The boy points to the next enemy and makes a clear sign indicating he will be his next victim. The rival trembles with hatred while the judge officializes Menghao's victory and closes the first round. The examiner announces Wang Tengfei's fight against Shuji, but the opponent humbly forfeits on the spot. The protagonist analyzes the arena and realizes that all the other fighters allied themselves just to defeat him. The temple examiner takes the front with a serious expression to give the official start to the next confrontation. He loudly calls out the hero's name, who raises his head, demonstrating a very confident expression. Next, the judge summons the furious Hanzong, who exudes a very intimidating purple magical aura. The rival warns that the time has finally come for the protagonist to pay dearly for disrespecting Elder Shangwen. With sarcasm, the young master retorts, stating that the elder is indeed the most influential figure in the entire sect. He walks slowly, explaining how he realized that magical branch is extremely poor and weak. The hero comments that the resources there are so scarce that the leaders just let chaos reign among everyone. He concludes that justice does not exist in the location and that only the strong who clear a path with blood will survive. The boy smirks, whispering that in any other location, a 9th-level warrior would be considered weak. Consumed by an overwhelming fury, the enemy shouts that the hero is seeking his doom and initiates his attack. The two opponents collide with immense speed, generating dozens of bright sparks of pure magical energy. After the violent exchange of blows, they slide backward to restore their posture in the combat arena. The villain draws an amulet and conjures 2 floating bands of a bluish tone, ordering them to attack all at once. The protagonist watches intrigued as those magical bands begin to spin rapidly around his body. Decided to test the opponent's defense power, the boy concentrates an immense fire energy in his hands. He conjures the powerful fire snake technique, which advances in a ruthless and destructive manner through the arena. In response, the villain stomps his foot with extreme force onto the rocky ground to activate a protection barrier. Several colossal stones shatter and begin to rapidly rise to repel the hero's attack. A gigantic hand made entirely of solid rock materializes in front of Hanzong to protect him. The massive flame snake hits the stone structure, generating a violent luminous impact on the platform. A colossal destructive explosion occurs on the spot, kicking up an immense curtain of dust and dense smoke. The villain mocks the attack and decides to use his most powerful blow, called the Five-Pointed Star mystical art. The blue scrolls around Manhua glow with much more intensity, trapping him in a strong barrier. Suddenly, terrifying red demonic masks begin to emerge in the midst of the area's magical smoke. Two colossal gaseous ghosts appear, hovering frighteningly right behind the young protagonist. The spectators fall into shock upon noting the rival manages to conjure that legendary two-colored technique. They marvelously conclude that the opponent's mystical weapon can only have been refined by the elite elder himself. The powerful elder Shangwan observes the duel from a distance with an expression of total arrogance and superiority. In a moment of the past, the elder demanded that his henchmen report in detail the entire hunt for the protagonist. The warriors explained how the youth miraculously manipulated the mountain monsters to attack the duo. The old man realized that wasn't sorcery, but rather the undeniable proof of a supreme treasure with the boy. Back in the present, the hero notes the toxic fog around him and decides it is time to test a new blow. He makes a quick horizontal slashing movement with his sword and bluntly orders all the fog to disperse. The boy's blade cuts with extreme precision the two gaseous ghosts that were trying to corner his body. The smoke demons and their masks are cut in half and begin to vanish into the air instantaneously. The protagonist calmly turns toward his rival and warns with mockery that now it is finally his turn. He points his index finger upward and summons dozens of silver flying swords around his body. The opponent despairs at the sight and tries to hastily grab his yellow protection seal to save himself. The storm of silver blades plunges from the skies at high speed against the startled opponent. Han Zong manages to activate his protective yellow shield, which envelops his body with strong electrical energy. Dozens of sequential and brutal detonations begin to hit the protection shield with extreme violence. The terrifying bombardment of explosive swords continues without stopping, generating an immense trail of destruction in the area. Under the relentless pressure, Han Zong's defensive seal breaks, generating a violent reddish explosion. The audience falls into complete panic upon seeing that Meng Hao explodes his valuable weapons as if they were ordinary trash. With agility, the protagonist leaps into the skies, totally dominating the air while preparing his blow of mercy. He repeats the words of the sect's divine justice and makes more than 30 mystical swords float in the air. The boy directs his hand downward, ordering the definitive attack of the silver blades against the villain. Han Zong is struck head on by the swords and collapses defeated, sealing Meng Hao's undeniable victory. The hero coldly laments his defeated rival's tragic fate, while his swords remain driven into the ground. The audience falls into a complete commotion upon realizing that the doubted boy actually finished the dangerous Han Zong. The proud Wang Tengfei observes the result from afar with a look filled with fury and total indignation. He realizes his precious heritage wasn't stolen by Han Zong and begins to suspect the true culprit. A large puddle of fluids stains the arena's sacred ground while everyone awaits the tournament's next decision. Meng Hao calms the startled chubby guy and consumes a pill, knowing his business justifies his vast resources. Grand Elder Ion watches the scene surprised, mentally praising the boy's raw talent in progress. However, he worries about the duel against Wang Tengfei, fearing that the youth's life runs a serious danger. Shangwen bites his tongue in jealousy and hatred, trying to understand the mystery behind the boy's immense quantity of swords. On the peak of an isolated mountain, a mysterious figure in blue attire closely follows all the combats. The leader admits he underestimated the protagonist, but laments because the inner slot was already destined for the wealthy rival. The proud warrior begins to climb the arena's rustic stairs, ready for the competition's final showdown. Wang Tengfei complains about the delay and concludes that Han Zong was too weak to be the true thief of the treasure. He discards the hypothesis of Meng Hao being the thief and focuses his mind on discovering who the author of the robbery is. The ambitious youth closes his eyes and vows that his second highly valuable magical heritage won't be stolen from him. He prides himself on his divine origin, aware that this small sect is nothing more than insignificant dust. The judge announces the start of the final confrontation between the two great rivals for the definitive promotion of the sect. The students whisper, saying the hero is being foolish for challenging the most brilliant warrior of the generation. Shungwon secretly plans to loot the hero's body to obtain the bag of treasures if he is taken down. The faithful chubby Fuga desperately screams in the grandstand, rooting for his loyal companion's victory. With calmness, the opponent decides to initiate hostilities, conjuring a colossal windstorm in the arena. The massive energy tornado advances, destroying everything in its path directly in the protagonist's direction. Manhwa warns that he also learned wind magic recently and firmly positions himself to counterattack. The boy leaps, delivering a powerful vacuum blade to intercept the terrifying windstorm. The two forces of nature collide, generating immense gusts of dust and smoke that cover the entire platform. The wealthy opponent watches the explosion without demonstrating any concern, maintaining his flawless posture. He mocks the boy's simple technique, stating that the power level of that miserable sect is ridiculous. Without backing down, the hero quickly summons dozens of fire swords, preparing his legendary flame attack. Tired of the boy's attempts, the enemy joins his hands to channel his secret aquatic wind magic. He channels the strong torrent of water and wind, generating a devastating spiral of pure mystical energy in the air. A colossal water column appears in the skies under the wealthy rival's order, canceling the flames of Manhua's weapons. Grand Elder Aoyang stands in shock upon realizing the youth used a legendary secret technique of his clan. The villain delivers the final blow, ordering the colossal water torrent to drown the opponent without any mercy. The monumental water tornado sweeps the floating arena, threatening to destroy the area's entire concrete base. The hero directs his swords in despair in an attempt to raise a protective barrier to save himself. However, Menghao's weapons are smashed all at once by the enemy torrent's crushing pressure. The boy is brutally thrown backward, realizing he won't manage to block that titanic force. The wealthy opponent notes that the boy managed to dodge and disdains his agility with a very cold look. Out of breath and with his robes torn, the hero lands injured on the shattered edges of the fighting platform. Elder Shangguan celebrates from afar, believing that the boy will certainly perish at the hands of his fearsome rival. The rich guy raises his index finger, coldly declaring he will put a definitive end to the boy's journey. The hero recognizes the terrible attack from the past and hastily swallows another pill to recover his strength. He pats his storage bag and orders all his remaining flying swords to come out right then. An unbelievable quantity of silver blades appears, hovering in the skies and startling all the spectators. More and more silver swords materialize, covering almost the entire expanse of the sky above the large arena. The colossal metallic wall of floating weapons shines intensely under the sunlight, startling those present. Concentrating all his energy, he unites the metals to conjure his gigantic wind sword technique. The students panic upon noting that the youth manages to manipulate more than 100 swords simultaneously. The Grand Elder worries, fearing that even that colossal attack will be useless against the rich guy's defenses. The villain laughs in mockery, claiming that trash will remain trash regardless of the quantity in battle. Meng Hao holds the gigantic wooden sword in the air and prepares to strike the proud Wang Tengfei. He throws that devastating blow with everything he has toward his opponent, who just stands still, watching from afar. Wang Tengfei points just one finger and manages to block the colossal impact of the massive weapon without the slightest effort. In the audience, the other disciples comment, while laughing, that Meng Hao's charge was completely useless against the leader. Suddenly, the large wooden structure begins to split into dozens of small, sharp swords in midair. The attack spreads and multiplies into even more blades, trying to pierce through Wang Tengfei's glowing barrier. An absurd amount of wooden swords completely surrounds the opponent, creating a deadly barrier in the sky. Wang Tengfei is shocked to realize the real danger when an immense, destructive glow explodes right in front of him. Wang Tengfei's powerful finger ends up being severely injured and begins to bleed heavily after the impact. He gnashes his teeth in pure rage upon noticing that his precious finger was crushed by the protagonist's bold attack. Manhwa warns without any mercy that he will destroy the finger his rival used to humiliate him in the past. The spectators and even the sect elders go into shock upon seeing that the prodigy leader ended up getting hurt. Wang Tengfei screams furiously as he realizes that Manhua was the true thief who stole his sacred treasure. Consumed by blind hatred, the rich young man swears to tear his rival apart for stealing the weapon meant for his grand destiny. The hero feigns total innocence about the theft, while the adversary insists that the wooden sword belonged to him. The villain conjures the spiritual beasts of a serpent and a tiger to take back control of the item by force. Meng Hao reacts quickly and fiercely strikes the spiritual tiger that charges toward him in the middle of the fight. The young man ends up coughing up blood from the effort, but the opponent just mocks him, saying he is unworthy of using the weapon. Meng Hao ridicules his rival's threats and asks ironically if the sword is truly that unique in the world. He extends his free hand and begins to materialize a second identical weapon, leaving his adversary confused. The protagonist stands imposing, wielding two identical wooden swords and glowing with an abundance of energy. Wang Tengfei's eyes widen in absolute shock at what he is witnessing in the arena. He trembles completely incredulous, unable to understand how two of that legendary, one-of-kind weapon could exist in the world. The hero advances slowly, asking mockingly if that second weapon also belonged to his rival's grand destiny. Meng Hao charges with fury, declaring that the pair of swords belongs exclusively to him and initiates the final attack. The opponent dodges by leaping toward the heavens to try to escape the terrible onslaught of the twin blades. The two engage in an impressive aerial confrontation, while the immense crowd watches everything from below. The audience is amazed to see the two young men flying high, even though they have not reached the legendary Foundation establishment level. Desperate, the rich young man decides to use his last and most powerful talisman, which he had saved to annihilate the protagonist. He raises the glowing talisman, ordering Meng Hao's demise, while the hero simply challenges him to try as he climbs swiftly. The spectators watch anxiously as the two warriors collide like small glowing dots in the cloudy sky. A colossal explosion of golden light takes over the entire sky, illuminating the arena with extreme intensity. In the depths of the spiritual lake inside Meng Hao's body, the precious core begins to shine intensely. The powerful essence of the ancient Chinese dragon roars fiercely, awakening the young man's full hidden potential. An immense storm of slashes and gusts of wind cuts through the skies in a truly epic clash of power. A massive cloud of smoke and dust covers the area while everyone waits in silence for the final result. A colossal beam of energy plummets from the sky and strikes the center of the platform with a thunderous impact. When the dust settles, the proud Wang Tengfei appears defeated and fallen amidst the debris of the stone arena. The crowd screams in disbelief at Meng Hao's victory and realizes that he intends to deal a final blow to his rival. The protagonist plummets from the skies, pointing his blade directly at his opponent to end it all. The desperate elder screams for the hero to stop at the exact moment the sword hits the ground, kicking up smoke. The supreme leader of the sect intervenes at the last second, holding the defeated youth and preventing the young master's demise. With a serious look, sect leader He Luoa orders the boy to calm down and not take things to extremes in battle. In the presence of the powerful sovereign, all the disciples present bow down in a sign of extreme respect. He Luoa officializes Meng Hao's victory and names him as the newest official disciple of the sect's elite. The young man looks back on his difficult journey of overcoming obstacles and makes a respectful bow in gratitude. With determination, he smiles, knowing that he has forged his own path and that he is now his own protector. Sect leader He Luoa repeats the grand announcement of victory, confirming the hero's new social status in the sect. The chubby boy celebrates joyfully, while the old elder smiles proudly, knowing he will no longer need to protect him. Some envious onlookers leave disgruntled upon seeing the young man fulfill all the requirements to enter the inner sect. Faced with the shocking result, all the disciples whisper in awe about Menghao's brilliant and meteoric rise. Elsewhere in the region, the imposing silhouette of the Black Mountain rises under a sky covered in dark clouds. A mysterious cosmic entity appears, watching everything from afar, and mocks the common name the sect adopted in the past. The floating being observes that Manhua inherited the legacy of the demon sealers and swallowed the valuable dragon core. As lightning cuts through the sky, the powerful creature warns that one day it will rebel against the divine path itself. Even with its main body asleep, the creature's spirit finds the whole situation extremely interesting. 7 days later, the protagonist is brought to bow before the imposing portrait of Patriarch Reliance. The young master kneels on the ground, fulfilling the traditional rules required for new members of the inner sect. Menghao praises his companion Chen Fan, admitting that he used to think he was very guarded, but now considers him a friendly man. Chen Fan laughs joyfully at the compliment and promises to guide his new brother to his luxurious new meditation cave. The hero reflects happily, realizing that the inner sect is very different and that his companion is a kind person. Chen Fan keeps talking non-stop, giving various pieces of advice about reading and criticizing the young man's eating habits. Even as they sit inside the new cave, the veteran continues to chatter away and tells the hero to organize his bags of belongings. The protagonist covers his own face, exhausted, realizing that his friend talks too much because he has almost no one else to converse with. Chen Fan asks mischievously if he is anxious to see Shukyung again, leaving the young master very embarrassed. Trying to change the subject quickly, the young man asks what happens after reaching the maximum limit of Q condensation. The veteran launches into another long explanation about the pillars of foundation establishment and their levels of purity. He reveals with regret that the legendary technique for achieving a perfect foundation was lost when the patriarch departed. The hero stares thoughtfully at the horizon upon hearing his companion explain the grand goal of becoming an immortal. Chen Fan advises him to expand his horizons beyond the small state of Jiao toward the immense and wealthy southern domain. The veteran's eyes gleam with pure determination as he describes the dangerous and fascinating beauties of the outside world. Sensing his friend's sincere tone, the protagonist asks if that is also the veteran's own grand dream. Flustered, the friend gets up and scratches his head, admitting with a foolish smile that he got a bit carried away in the conversation. Standing up, he proudly reveals his grand dream of becoming as powerful as the founding patriarch of that sect. Meng Hao jokes, saying that his friend's imposing stance and heroic speech make him look like a true villain. The young master momentarily turns serious and prepares to reveal a bit more about his own past. The veteran continues to make assumptions about the boy's simple origins and comments that it is normal for him to still be adapting. The hero smiles genuinely, thanking him for the words, and confesses that he finally feels like he is in a real sect. To the hero's dismay, his companion decides to start another long lecture, prompting the boy to ask for water to interrupt him. Night falls silently, and the full moon shines majestically in the sky, illuminating the entire mountain range. In his room, Wang Tengfei stares at the remains of his broken amulet, devastated at having lost everything and nearly losing his life in the arena. The rich young master trembles with hatred as he remembers the face of the protagonist, whom he previously considered just an insignificant insect. He lets out a hysterical, bitter laugh, realizing that all his years of sacrifice and planning were in vain. Suddenly, a monumental explosion of spiritual energy destroys the doors of the sumptuous room, startling the young master. Before him appear two imposing figures from his elite clan who have come to rescue the heir after the terrible defeat. The experienced leader harshly rebukes the boy's discouragement, stating that his real rivals are far from that sect. The elite man asks sharply what the boy's last name is, aiming to restore the heir's lost pride. Wang Tengfei stands up straight and screams with all his might, reaffirming the name of his powerful clan. He looks the veteran dead in the eye and declares with pride that his last name is worthy of kings. Satisfied, the elite man agrees, commenting that in a few years the young man will reach the foundation establishment stage. The beautiful young woman reassures him, reminding him that in the future, his common arrival will still be nothing more than an insignificant insect. Even though he feels superior, the proud, rich young man secretly vows to crush the protagonist at the very first opportunity. That same night, the disciples of the sect look at the sky in fear as they spot an immense, flying ship crossing the clouds. A colossal, mystical vessel adorned with beautiful bluish lights floats majestically above the local treetops. The young master watches everything in absolute silence, knowing that the luxurious vessel belongs to Wang Tengfei's clan. On the deck of the flying ship, the powerful leaders converse about how isolated and decadent that small sect of Zhao is. Wang Tengfei stares at the forest below with a frigid gaze, whispering the name of his great arch enemy with immense hatred. Suddenly, the mysterious veteran activates a powerful ocular technique that shines intensely toward the sect's courtyard. Feeling the impact of the spell, Manhua is hit by a terrible spiritual pressure and suddenly coughs up blood. He collapses onto the stone floor while the other disciples approach in fear, dreading the terrible vengeance of the wealthy clan. The aggressor reveals himself to be Wang Sifan, a fearsome protector of the powerful Wang clan who possesses an incredible cultivation base. Wang Sifan nods coldly, declaring he only came to fetch Wang Tengfei before ordering the ship to depart. Sect leader He Luoa watches in silence as the imposing flying boat disappears into the clouds in the blink of an eye. Feeling the terror of that power, Meng Hao understands that he needs to become much stronger so he won't be crushed in the future. The young master spends 2 weeks recovering in bed with the help of a small servant sent by the sect leaders. During his recovery, the young man studies ancient local maps in the scripture pavilion to understand the southern domain. He receives his first spiritual stones from the inner sect and notices that they are identical to the ones used in the mirror. Chen Fan explains that it is a valuable mid-grade stone equivalent to 100 common units from the outer sect. The veteran explains that high-grade stones are rare and worth more than 10,000 low-grade stones in the region. Meng Hao panics completely upon realizing that he spent a fortune equivalent to 2,000 high-grade stones. Feeling a comical sting in his wallet, the boy returns to his quarters and is later assigned to distribute pills in the sect. A dense torrent of pills floats majestically in the sky, while the disciples extend their hands to receive them. Before a large dragon statue, the protagonist encourages the newcomers to focus on cultivating their energies. The young man concludes the ceremony and begins to walk down the stone steps, while Fugui cheerfully accompanies him closely. Some former rivals approach humbly, offering bags of gifts in the hope of making peace. The boys express their gratitude and bow respectfully while watching the hero walk away peacefully through the courtyard. Meng Hao asks if the chubby boy planned all of that, and Fuga laughs, admitting he gave them a little nudge to help things along. The hero advises his friend to be careful and offers him Wang Tengfei's wealthy old cave so he can train better. Fugai celebrates excitedly, saying he will be able to show off to the girls, while the protagonist tells him to go cultivate. A short time later, firm and decisive footsteps echo softly over the green grass of the sect's forest. A beautiful wooden building houses the thriving pill shop, which is now entirely managed by the chubby boy. The young man walks along satisfied, knowing that his business is doing very well under the administration of his loyal partner. The young master halts his steps upon spotting a familiar trail of beautiful light, colored hair shining under the sunlight. He makes a respectful bow and cheerfully greets Su-kyun, who has finally emerged from her mystical isolation. The beautiful young woman congratulates him on his advancement to the inner sect and asks why he didn't use the pendant she gave him. With a friendly smile, the young man explains that he managed to win the difficult duel before even needing to use the item. He extends his hand and offers a new, gleaming beauty pill that he personally retrieved from the shop, especially for her. The young woman stares at the pill in silence for a few moments before extending her delicate fingers to accept the gift. Feeling tired after the long period of training, she thanks him for the present and mentions that she will return to her quarters. The protagonist remains standing on the stone path, watching the girl's silhouette disappear among the trees. Shu Qing's delicate steps echo softly on the ground as she makes her way back through the dense woods. The young woman recalls discovering that the first beauty pill she received in the past had not been exchanged by him. The young man lets out a light sigh, keeping his posture firm as the gentle afternoon breeze stirs the leaves around him. With a shy smile, he scratches the back of his neck, deciding that it is also the ideal moment to return to his own training. Sitting cross-legged in his temple, the hero meditates deeply, absorbing the dense torrent of green energy. The young master opens his eyes in surprise upon noticing a mysterious and bright emerald flame appear on the stone wall. The message of fire summons Manhua and his two loyal companions to report immediately to the Grand Hall. The imposing and sumptuous palace of the eastern peak rises majestically between the immense rock faces of the mountain range. The three young individuals enter the grand main hall together in a coordinated manner, maintaining a very respectful posture. Supreme Leader He Loa appears before the gigantic statue of the ancestor and orders them to pay their respects. The group walks slowly over the luxurious red carpet, focusing their attention on the imposing stone figure. While bowing, Manhua thinks in surprise that the patriarch's image looks much more like a brutal warrior. He Loa explains about the ancient glory of the sect and decides that the moment has finally come to reveal the whole truth to them. The leader reveals that the patriarch's power in the past was entirely tied to a legendary spiritual scripture. The veteran Chen Fan is surprised to hear about the ancient scroll capable of guaranteeing a perfect foundation in the sect. The leader explains that each part of that divine scripture allows the cultivator to reach the most powerful state of all. Hiluoa reveals that the heir of the Wang clan only joined them to steal the Q condensation scroll. Meng Hao realizes with a shock that his victory actually crushed his rival's hopes, and he sees a grand golden opportunity there. Leader Hiluoa laments, explaining that the powerful scripture exists only in the living memory of the ancient patriarch. He reveals that only a few leaders know that the powerful ancestor of the sect actually has not truly passed away. He explains that the ancestor tried to advance to the spirit-severing level 4 centuries ago, but his lifespan was short. To survive, the patriarch entered a millennia-long meditation and left orders to send out special jades every 100 years. The most talented disciples must use the jades to access the meditation site and try to obtain the sacred heritage. Hiluoa smiles slightly, revealing that the grand hidden prize is the sect's legendary and coveted spiritual scripture. Curious, Chen Fan raises his hand and asks if no disciple managed to succeed during these 400 years. The leader explains that an accident weakened the patriarch, leaving only 3 connection jades sent 5 years ago. Meng Hao smiles nervously as he realizes that he did indeed steal Wang Tengfei's coveted spot, generating a mortal hatred in him. With a swift movement, Hiluoa shoots the 3 brightly glowing red jades directly toward the youths in the room. The protagonist reacts with extreme agility and manages to catch his red jewel in the air with a very firm grip. The leader warns that their success in understanding the sacred scripture will depend entirely on each individual's luck. Suddenly, the eyes of the colossal stone statue of the ancestor begin to glow with an intense and frightening white light. An immense portal of blue spiritual energy appears in the center of the hall, spinning in a magical and mesmerizing way on the floor. The leader points to the passage and formally orders the 3 youths to enter the portal toward their grand destinies. In an instant, the 3 disciples leap all at once into the blue beam of energy, disappearing into the passage. Left alone, He Luo wonders which of them will obtain the scripture, or if they will all return empty, handed from that trial. He reflects on the exhaustion of leading the sect under pressure from rivals and fears for the group's future loss of power. Wary, the leader plans to hand over his position to whoever inherits the scripture and retire for good to the distant mountains. The protagonist opens his eyes in confusion and begins to look closely in all directions, trying to recognize the new location. Before him appears an ancient and mysterious structure shrouded in smoke under a completely dark and starless sky. Chen Fan appears, explaining that they are in the underground palace located right below the outer sect area. Meng Hao extends his hand with curiosity to touch the dense gray mist that blocks all visibility of the environment. Chen Fan quickly stops him, warning that the smoke is a dangerous magical restriction that should not be touched lightly. The companions agree to use their respective jades to begin their individual searches for meditation points. Chen Fan channels his spiritual energy, causing his red jade to begin emitting a strong emerald flame. The veteran wishes his brothers good luck before quickly darting toward his chosen spot in the hall. Su Qing also chooses her own path and advises the protagonist to be very careful before setting off on her search. The young master watches her walk with firm steps into the darkness, leaving only him in that silent courtyard. He stares at his red jewel intently and prepares to inject his mystical energy to begin his trial as well. A deafening and terrifying roar unexpectedly cuts through the silence, making the boy tremble with pure dread at the sudden sound. From the shadows emerges the decrepit spirit of a monstrous elder, extending its sharp claws toward the startled boy. The hero stares at the bizarre creature with eyes wide in astonishment, trying to comprehend the danger he has just encountered. The terrible apparition roars fiercely, emanating an overwhelming wave of energy that makes the entire environment tremble with dread. The boy tries to back away while staring at the glowing jewel, noticing that the monster hesitates when facing the red glow of the jade. Realizing that the creature recoils before the artifact, the boy raises the mystical jade imposingly to defend himself once and for all. The monster quickly flees in fear, making the protagonist question the true identity of that bizarre creature. He spots dozens of other gray figures in the smoke and concludes that they possess the strength of Foundation Masters. He deduces that the creatures are security puppets created to destroy any intruder who does not possess the mystical jade. Walking further along, the hero comes across an unbelievable sight of a gigantic mountain made of rare stones. His eyes gleam with greed, but he notices that the mountain is gray due to a protective barrier that is impossible to breach. Controlling his greed, the hero decides to focus on his mission and follows the beam of red light guiding his steps in the woods. The connection artifact floats gently and comes to a static halt before a large and beautiful green rock in the clearing. He notes that the stone has color and no mist around it, confirming it to be one of the coveted meditation points. The boy analyzes the situation thoughtfully, knowing he will have little time to unravel the great mystery of the inheritance. He fills himself with determination, remembering the pride of overcoming Wang Tengfei's plans and winning the rare scripture. Determined to win, he pulls his loyal bronze mirror from his bag, planning to use its powerful mystical copying ability again. He begins to deposit his spiritual stones into the mirror one by one, hoping to duplicate the secret of the location. The young man shouts in annoyance upon seeing that the mirror consumed almost his entire new fortune without releasing the expected result. Devastated by the loss, he kneels before the artifact on the ground, wondering what he will do to save his investment. The hero remembers that there are still a few rare stones left that Chen Fan mentioned possess a massive market value. Without hesitation, the young man decides to risk it all and pulls his largest and most precious cultivation stone from his bag of belongings. Meng Hao shouts in shock upon seeing the bronze mirror produce 15 jades all at once using only that single precious stone. His eyes widen as he realizes the immense amount of actual money he had spent to duplicate the sword before. The boy cries in dramatic regret, lamenting the immense fortune spent that he can never get back. He tries to calm down, focusing his mind on the scripture and promising himself that the entire loss will be well worth it. Holding the burning jade firmly in flames, he declares the official start of his grand meditation attempt. The young man sits cross-legged at the point of enlightenment and begins the burning of his first spiritual connection jade. An immense globe of bright red energy expands, covering the protagonist's body during his meditation. Various voices whisper glowing runes into his mind, causing him to dive deeply into a spiritual dream. The boy floats amidst thousands of ancient golden scriptures, completely losing track of the passage of time. Without him noticing, the strong red flame of the mystical jade goes out completely, indicating the end of his trial time. He opens his eyes upset, concluding that he failed because he heard only noises without being able to decipher any lesson. Determined not to give up, he pulls out his second jade in flames and prepares to begin another attempt. At that very same moment, the beautiful Shu King meditates upon her rock, but her beam of red light begins to fade at the sight. Su King opens her eyes discouraged, realizing that unfortunately she did not succeed in connecting with the mystical spirit. She hopes that Chen Fan had better luck than her and managed to get the legendary spell to help restore the sect. With a light, tender smile, she ponders that she would also be happy if young Meng Hao managed to inherit that power. Upon returning, she finds the veteran already sitting on the ground of the plaza, and both confess that they failed in their attempts. Chen Fan suggests that they wait together for the return of their younger brother, in the hope that his luck was greater. The scene cuts back in time to reveal in detail what was happening to Meng Hao during his tests. None of them noticed that the spiritual energy spent by the Jades was flowing into the secret chamber where the patriarch rested. The beam of red light crosses the darkness of the rocky ground and travels directly toward the sleeping body of the ancestor. The mystical energy strikes the creature's fingers, causing its greenish palm to tremble and suddenly come to life. The ancient patriarch awakens from his trance, whispering in confusion that the energy belongs to his own blood crystal. Next, the second and third trails of red light fuse into his chest, giving much more vigor to the old being. He opens his eyes completely, realizing that the sect has sent new warriors to undergo the inheritance test. The old being laments being weak, knowing that only 3 jades were originally sent out. Suddenly, a fourth beam appears in the air, leaving the patriarch astonished since he had not sent any other mystical jewel. Pleading for his own life, he focuses all his attention on the new and mysterious torrent of energy flowing from above. In the courtyard, the two companions continue to wait thoughtfully. With no sign of Meng Hao's return so far, Chen Fan finds the delay strange and suggests they wait a bit longer, since it is dangerous to walk through the darkness of the place. Back with the hero, Meng Hao is sweating intensely, focusing all his strength on his 4th meditation test. The boy begins to burn the jade sequentially, utilizing the 7th, the 9th, and even the 14th crystal. He holds his head in pain due to the immense mental fatigue generated by the torrent of voices echoing in his mind. Determined to continue, he spends more than 20 jades, covering the entire ground of the clearing with the glowing remnants. Suddenly, the mysterious voices begin to form clear, golden runes, revealing the first sacred word. Meng Hao floats amidst the golden glow and finally manages to read the full title of the legendary secret scripture. In the underground cave, Patriarch Reliance remains motionless, concentrated on absorbing that entire torrent of life. His eyes widen in astonishment as he realizes that 35 jades have already been consumed during that trial. The old being enters a total panic, trying to decipher where so many crystals identical to his own blood came from. Frightened, he uses his mystical perception to snoop around the place and discover who is responsible for that madness. The Patriarch projects 3 spheres of light and observes from afar the state of meditation that each youth is in. The elder stares at the image of Meng Hao in absolute shock, recognizing him as the sole individual responsible for the whole mystery. 3 days pass, and Shu Qing decides to stand up, proposing that the two finally begin to search for their companion. But Chen Fan interrupts her upon spotting the tired silhouette of the protagonist walking slowly back across the bridge. The hero lies, saying he heard nothing but noise and ended up passing out, asking playing dumb if they won. His companion replies laughing that everyone came back empty-handed, while the protagonist hides a massive secret. The scene changes, showing Manhua awakening suddenly beneath the beautiful waters of his own internal spiritual lake. The hero emerges shouting with pure excitement as he feels the currents of clean energy renew his entire cultivation. He stares at the skies of his internal sea, which are filled with bright golden characters, now floating majestically. Satisfied, he celebrates upon noticing that the Q condensation spell was engraved directly onto his divine soul. He celebrates greatly for obtaining the power that guarantees the perfect cultivation base in the prestigious southern domain. The patriarch becomes infuriated in the underground temple, regretting having left the point of enlightenment at that location. He questions himself, intrigued by how the boy obtained the sacred heritage while spending only 50 blood crystals. The elder laments because he needed the boy to spend hundreds of jades to restore his own life once and for all. Turmoiled and far too weak, the old man despairs, thinking of a quick way out so as not to lose that precious chance. He flashes a sinister smile as he devises a plan to lure all the cultivators of the region to his hiding place. His malevolent plan is to use the collective, spiritual energy of the invaders to free him and then consume their lives. He observes the three youths deciding to return and resolves to act quickly before they escape through the blue portal. The old man spits blood onto his hand and crushes it against the stone floor, activating a powerful mystical barrier in the cave. The ground begins to tremble violently, startling the group of youths who were preparing to cross back through the passage. A colossal black stone tablet covered in brightly glowing golden runes rises from the ground before the three disciples. Shu Qing and Chen Fan go into shock upon noticing that the monument displays the texts of the legendary Qi condensation scripture. Meng Hao stares at the structure suspiciously, wondering why the monument appeared at that exact moment. He narrows his eyes, analyzing in detail each of the glowing runes engraved on the surface of the structure. The boy astutely perceives that the scriptures have been altered and that the monument is actually a massive trap. Shu Qing suggests taking the stone monument for the supreme leader to analyze, and the boy agrees to deflect suspicions from the plan. The patriarch celebrates, foreseeing that the emergence of the mystical monument will generate a celestial event that will attract the whole region. Suddenly, Chen Fan raises his arm, ordering the group to stop immediately, leaving the patriarch unable to understand a thing. Chen Fan explains that taking the tablet will bring disasters and suggests copying the runes onto scrolls, leaving the rock in place. The group begins to copy the scriptures while the patriarch roars in fury at seeing his evil plan go completely awry. The elder screams with hatred against Chen Fan's honesty, while praising Meng Hao for taking the heritage and staying quiet. He gnashes his teeth in frustration, knowing that without the tablet on the outside, the rival cultivators will never be lured in. With the copies made on the small jades, Chen Fan mentions that they can finally open the portal to return. Shu Qing agrees and positions herself firmly to initiate the portal, opening ritual together with the elite group. The patriarch panics completely, realizing he cannot let the trio escape before his grand plan succeeds. The blue portal appears, glowing intensely in the clearing, and the trio begins to walk toward the passage of light, resolved not to lose that unique opportunity. The old man extends his greenish fingers to force the tablet outward. The group of youths crosses the threshold of the mystical passage and begins to vanish into the air toward the sect's main hall. The monstrous elderly man makes a terrible physical effort and ends up coughing up an immense amount of blood from the spell. The three elite warriors finally emerge from the portal and land back onto the red carpet of the sect. Hiluoa receives them with relief and celebrates the successful return of the youths. after their time in the mysterious cave. Suddenly, a thick and bizarre beam of mystical blood shoots out of the portal, crossing the entire hall of the sect. Chen Fan tries to begin his report about the stone monument, but the bloody beam passes right past the team. The red torrent travels at high speed and exits through the large open doors of the palace toward the mountain skies. The disciples go on high alert, fearing that some dangerous monster has escaped along with them through the portal. Without wasting a single second, Hiluoa leads the group in a quick dash outside the temple to see what happened. In the skies appears a gigantic and majestic projection of brightly glowing golden runes, covering the region's entire horizon. Hiluoa and the young Manhua watch the sky, in awe at the immense celestial spell that has formed at the location. In the distant Cold Wind sect, the local elders interrupt their tasks and point in fear toward the glow in the sky. They turn completely pale, whispering in fear that the ancestral legend seems to be finally coming true. In the Heavenly Pool sect, the leaders scream in ecstasy upon recognizing the text of the divine scripture above the clouds. At another location, the master of the Violet Fate sect orders the immediate mobilization of all troops toward the neighboring territory. In the courtyard of the Reliance sect, all the disciples gather in a frenzy, observing the immense golden lettering in the clouds. Fugai chews on his amulet in shock, while the generals and elders look at each other in a complete state of silence and panic. In the inner room, a beautiful green magic circle begins to glow intensely on the floor, indicating a new journey. Grand Elder Aoyang positions himself upon the mystical platform and quickly teleports far away from there. Back in the hall, Hiluoa interrogates the three youths, and Chen Fan presents the scroll with the mystical copy they made. Upon analyzing the copy, Leader Hiluoa reveals in frustration that the scriptures, and even the signal in the sky, are completely fake. Manhua watches in silence, confirming his suspicions, and admires the leader for also deciphering that great farce. Leader Hiluoa orders the youths to wait safely in the palace. As difficult times are approaching, an immense pillar of light strikes the ground of the courtyard with a frightening crash before the two young cultivators. Several beams of light cross the skies of the Zhao region, spreading majestically across the entire horizon. The torrents of energy cut through the mountains, attracting the attention of all the powerful local masters. An immense emerald barrier appears, protecting the main temple while golden scriptures glow in the sky. A cultivator in blue robes appears imposing at the peak of a rock, releasing an immense wave of mystical power. The man watches in shock when suddenly 5 colorful portals begin to open right above the mountains of the region. 5 powerful figures shrouded in glowing auras appear, floating imposingly in the middle of the dense forest. The red-haired invader bellows with fury, declaring that he has finally found the famous Reliance sect. Sect leader Hiluoa faces the powerful invaders, who float menacingly before his barrier. The disciples panic upon realizing that the invaders in the sky are monsters at the core formation level. Hiluoa mocks the Cold Wind sect's grand display of power, keeping his posture completely firm. The two sides stare at each other intensely, while a massive spiritual pressure takes over the entire cliffside. One of the gray, bearded elders demands an immediate explanation regarding the mysterious phenomenon that arose in the sect. Hiluoa counters saying he does not know the origin of the glow, but the red-haired man warns aggressively that he will teach him. The old man orders an immediate surrender and the deactivation of the protective barrier, threatening to destroy the entire Reliance sect. Hiluoa repeats the terrible threat in a low tone, while staring at the invaders with a deeply cold look. In the temple courtyard, hundreds of frightened disciples wait in silence for the outcome of that tense confrontation. A white-haired young woman supports an injured ally, warning him not to move due to severe internal damage. Fugai thanks the protagonist for the protection from earlier, while Manhua warns that now everything depends on the leader. Hiluoa suddenly begins to laugh out loud ironically at the absurd threat of destruction to his clan. Aoyang teaches his disciple Chen Fan that the power of a single roar proves that strength is the only real law of this world. Hilua says he swore to protect everyone, but admits with sadness that he does not have the strength to save everyone there. He shouts, resigning from his position as supreme leader, and declares that he no longer wants those small mountains of the sect. Chen Fan stares at Grand Elder Iang with concern, noticing the deep sigh of sadness from the old master. In a swift movement, former leader Hilua launches himself into the sky in a trail of light, abandoning the cliffside. Hilua reappears floating in the skies alongside Aoyang, leaving all the disciples in a complete state of shock. Aoyang consoles his companion, saying they did what they could, and that now they must only fulfill their duty. Hilua orders all disciples to listen closely to his official announcement of the dissolution of the Reliance sect. The faces of the youths contort in absolute despair and shock upon hearing that the sect no longer exists. The leader threatens to detonate the sect's entire barrier and blow himself up along with the rivals if they hurt the former disciples. Manhua understands that the leader made this extreme decision solely to save the life of each of his disciples. The invading leaders accept the proposal and promise to spare the youths provided they leave the premises immediately. The elderly woman smiles greedily, realizing that the valuable treasure must be hidden somewhere on that mountain. Relieved by the promise, Hilua waves his hand, undoing the great protective emerald barrier once and for all. The gigantic green dome dissolves completely, leaving the main temple totally exposed to the outside world. The cultivators watch anxiously as their divine protection disappears, not knowing what will happen to them now. The Reliance sect appears entirely vulnerable under the clear sky, revealing the grandiosity of its wooden structures. With a heavy heart, Hilua invites Grand Elder Aoyang to finally depart from that sacred place. Suddenly, a deafening scream echoes from the sky, declaring that no one will be allowed to leave that area alive. A colossal storm of freezing, cutting winds emerges, completely surrounding the sect's courtyard once again. Hilua looks back in fear, trying to identify the owner of that powerful magical onslaught in the air. From the clouds emerges a beautiful and imposing dark-haired woman wearing an elegant purple outfit on her platform. The former leader gnashes his teeth in desperation upon recognizing the feared Black Sieve sect from the wealthy southern domain. Even the invading monsters from before begin to break into a cold sweat of dread upon noticing the arrival of that fearsome clan. The powerful leader of the Black Sieve sect reaffirms that no one will escape from there as a tear in space begins to appear. An extremely muscular warrior in golden armor emerges, stepping through the dimensional rift with a sinister laugh. The woman smiles slightly, identifying the newcomer as Zhao Shanling from the powerful Golden Frost sect. Zhao Shanling crosses his arms, remarking mockingly that his group has just as much right to be there as her rivals do. The two colossal powerhouses face each other in the skies when a third, mysterious wave of energy crosses the region. A new, legendary swordsman appears magnificently, floating above the clouds atop his gigantic black blade. Hilua trembles with dread upon recognizing the powerful swordsman as Zhou Yanyun from the legendary solitary sword sect. Aoyang explains that that is the greatest powerhouse in the southern domain, capable of shaking the heavens with a single sword strike. Manhua is fascinated to realize that the strength of the southern domain is infinitely greater than he ever could have imagined. Meanwhile, Chen Fan runs desperately inside the main temple in order to carry out an important secret plan. The young man crouches behind an immense statue and begins to tinker with an old secret mechanism hidden in the floor. Chen Fan whispers that he concealed the passage to ensure no one disturbs the sacred meditation of their ancient ancestor. In the depths of the earth, Patriarch Reliance laughs joyfully upon sensing the presence of the powerful masters who arrived. He celebrates, knowing that the invaders will soon breach his secret chamber, finally allowing him to regain his freedom. The old man panics upon seeing through the mirror that his own disciple has just closed and locked the secret entrance. He roars in fury, cursing for having accepted such honest disciples who ruined his plans for the second time. In the sky, the deities fly over the mountains frustrated at being unable to track down the patriarch's hiding place. Zhou Yanyan reflects in frustration upon realizing that the aura of the legendary sacred scroll is not on any of the disciples. Suddenly, his sharp gaze focuses on a specific young man in the courtyard, changing the direction of his thoughts. He projects a powerful beam of light that crosses the skies, falling straight in the direction of where the group is. The swordsman descends floating and uses his white energy to bind and raise Chen Fan into the air relentlessly. He praises the young man's immense talent and extends a direct invitation for him to join the solitary sword sect. The other disciples shout in worry upon seeing their beloved companion bound by the swordsman's mystical chains. Hiluowa and Ayang smile in relief, knowing that invitation guarantees a bright and secure future for Chen Fan. To everyone's astonishment, Chen Fan shouts, refusing the invitation and stating that he will never join another sect in his life. The former members are perplexed by his stubbornness, while the swordsman questions whether he knows the weight of his clan. Keeping his honor intact, the young man firmly insists on his refusal to abandon his origins in the Reliance sect. Chen Fan reveals that he knows very well the prestigious position of Protector Elder and the immense fame the master possesses. The young master admits to knowing that he is giving up a divine opportunity to increase his cultivation level. Impressed by such great loyalty, the elder decides to accept the young man not just as a student, but as his personal disciple. The swordsman makes the boy fall asleep and confesses to the enemy leader that continuing to look for the treasure there is useless. The beautiful woman decides that she will also take a talented disciple, pointing directly at the young Su-kyun. A strong purple energy envelops Su-kyun, raising her from the ground toward the platform of the powerful Black Sieve sect. Manhua watches the scene in absolute shock as he sees his beloved companion captured right before his eyes. The two grand sects begin to move away, carrying off the two most talented youths from the ancient sect. The hero murmurs sadly at his friend's departure, while Fuga bites his wooden sword, thinking about his own future. The chubby boy comically plans to return to his homeland and become the wealthiest landowner in Zhao. Suddenly, the brutish warrior appears before the boy, astonished by the impressive strength of Fugia's teeth. The man grabs Fugwai by the collar, assuring him that he will be the new heir to the legendary Golden Frost technique. Meng Hao tries to extend his hand, calling out for his friend, who is carried away without the slightest chance of resisting that warrior. Before departing, the armored warrior stares closely at Meng Hao, noticing that there is something incredible hidden in his body. The protagonist freezes completely upon realizing that his greatest secret may have been discovered by his powerful rival. In the skies, the two talented disciples remain asleep while the vessels begin to initiate the final journey. Resolved not to leave the protagonist behind, the man conjures a gigantic hand of red energy to grab him. A colossal torrent of bloody smoke erupts from the ground while a voice roars that no one will dare touch the hero. The leaders of the grand sects panic upon feeling the overwhelming pressure that begins to cover the temple. The other masters retreat desperately, trying to escape the immense sea of red energy consuming the courtyard. The mysterious mist spreads rapidly, causing all the low-level cultivators to fall into a deep sleep. The former invaders tremble in absolute dread upon recognizing the mystical origin of that overwhelming presence. A colossal red phantom of Patriarch Reliance rises above the temple, revealing that he is still alive. In the depths, the old man realizes that if everyone leaves, his plan to drain spiritual energy will fail completely. He decides to act to protect Meng Hao, knowing that the protagonist is his last hope of recovering his divine strength. The immense eyes of the gigantic red statue open, glowing with an intense and frightening white energy. The invaders cover their mouths, while spilling blood under the direct impact of the powerful spiritual shockwave. Zhou Yanyan and the other elite leaders also suffer severe internal damage as their barriers begin to crack. Hiluo enters total despair upon remembering that he just dissolved the sect right in front of his own ancestor. The patriarch shouts with fury, rebuking the invaders for daring to dissolve his clan and trying to end his last disciple. Zhou Yanyan tries to threaten him with the power of his sect, while the woman appeals by saying she is related to a friend of the elder. Xiao Shanling trembles with dread, bowing humbly and begging for the immediate forgiveness of the terrifying patriarch. The old man orders the leaders to vanish from there, reminding them of an ancient pact and allowing them to take the 3 disciples away. Without wasting time, the 3 grand figures flee at high speed, streaking across the skies back to their lands. The other old invading monsters also beg for mercy, while making sure to escape as quickly as possible. The imposing patriarch warns the escapees that he only spared their lives so they would carry an important warning of his return. The ancestor coldly accepts the end of his clan, declaring that he no longer cares about the destiny of the Reliance sect. He delivers a powerful red spear to Meng Hao, warning that the boy must use it to annihilate any rival. Terrified by the terrible threat, the remaining cultivators hurry to evacuate the entire mountain area. In the courtyard, the sleeping bodies of the former disciples begin to float mysteriously, drifting toward the gate. Meng Hao finds himself completely alone in the center of the immense courtyard as powerful shock waves cut through the environment. A strong gust of wind blows away the remnants of the red mist, leaving the location in total calm. The young master looks around in absolute silence, processing the fact that his beloved sect has now been undone. He watches the silhouettes of his former companions floating far away, while he remains motionless on the ground. Outside the main gate, the sleeping bodies of hundreds of disciples are deposited on the ground. He Luo bows in shame, asking for forgiveness before departing forever, flying alongside Elder Aoyang. Meanwhile, the final trails of the bloody smoke converge back toward the palace, where the hero awaits it. Meng Hao makes respectful bow and begins to praise the ancestor in an exaggerated manner to try to win his favor. The patriarch taps the young man's forehead, telling him to stop that foolish flattery, which will not work on him. The hero comically discovers that the elderly man was bluffing and that the spell will last for only a very short time. The elder entrusts the boy with the crucial mission of luring all the great local masters to his shelter within 1 year. He promises a grand mystical reward if the hero succeeds and implants the map mentally into the youth. The projection dissipates completely, leaving a final dramatic warning regarding the survival of the young master. Totally alone in the empty palace, Meng Hao walks thoughtfully, observing the silent rooms of the sect. He consoles his own heart, thinking that Chen Fan and Fuga's departure to the grand sects was the best choice. The boy also sincerely hopes that everything goes very well on the new path trodden by the beautiful Su Kyung. Lying on the stone floor, he wonders in which year or month he will be able to meet his great companions of the journey again. His eyes stare at the cloudy sky while he focuses his mind on his next and decisive cultivation step. Resolved to follow his own path, the hero climbs onto his flying sword and glides calmly toward the forest. The young man reflects that before he was just a simple mortal, but now he is capable of crossing the skies with extreme skill. He remembers that it has been nearly 3 years since he departed and decides to begin his journey back to Yunji County at once. 1 day later, the hero reaches the shore of the vast North Sea and realizes he will need a boat to continue. Suddenly, a friendly elderly boatman approaches the shore, offering help to cross the calm waters. Sitting in the boat, an adorable little girl offers wine, and the boy proudly reveals his simple origins. The old man praises Yunji County, commenting on the incredible auspicious signs that have appeared there in recent years. The young man confesses he has never heard of that, but praises the excellent flavor of the mystical drink he just tasted. Impressed by the poetic speeches of the duo, the protagonist stares at the immense lake while listening to the beautiful stories. Intrigued, he asks the old man the reason why that calm lake is called the North Sea by the entire local population, The elderly man teaches that the real difference lies only in the eternal perspective of whoever stares at the immensity of those waters. The wise words deeply touch the young man's heart, causing him to plunge into a profound trance. Shortly after, the small boat finally reaches the other sandy shore, allowing the hero to resume his way. Manhua waves cheerfully, saying goodbye to the adorable little girl who returns with her grandfather to the middle of the lake. He walks to an isolated spot on the shore, feeling his mind bubble with the revelations and advice of the old man. The hero stares at the mountains, repeating in his thoughts that the sea is eternal and capable of welcoming hundreds of rivers into its bed. He closes his eyes slowly, allowing that deep wisdom to guide the flow of his own spiritual energy. Sitting in the lotus position under the shade of the trees, the protagonist begins an incredibly focused meditation. Suddenly, the large lake of energy in his internal sea begins to ripple violently, expanding without stopping. A colossal storm of spiritual waves arises around him, while sacred scriptures glow golden in the sky. The boy channels an immense amount of energy from the North Sea, expanding his cultivation sea in an epic fashion. Gigantic waves form in the water, while the young man remains concentrated, absorbing an incredible amount of power. He reaches the rare state of Tao enlightenment thanks to the powerful connection to the dragon core he possesses in his body. 3 days pass until the protagonist finally opens his eyes, returning slowly to the reality of the physical world. He appears floating in his internal cultivation sea, which now glows completely golden, with an indescribable energy. Back on the shore of the lake, he notices that the entire immense storm of energy has dissipated completely around him. The young master stands up calmly and stretches, satisfied upon feeling his body extremely light and invigorated. With this, he discovers that he has reached the peak of the 7th level of QI condensation incredibly fast. He recalls ancient texts about legendary demons capable of transforming rivers and forests into their own domains. The young man makes a respectful bow in gratitude to the lake, promising to help it become a true sea in the future. A short time later, the hero finally arrives at his old hometown, wearing the elegant white robes of a master. He walks nostalgically through the streets, remembering his old childhood dreams before heading toward his old house. Upon reaching the gate of his old residence, he pushes the wooden doors open carefully to see who resides there. An elderly gentleman appears in the courtyard and recognizes him with surprise, calling his wife to see the young man who had vanished. The affectionate lady is moved to see the young man again, praising his growth and inviting him for dinner in his old home. Meng Hao lies about his whereabouts and offers a bag filled with silver coins to buy the ancestral residence back. The couple accepts living there to take care of the place, but refuses the coins because they consider the boy as if he were a real son. Without the couple noticing, the young man leaves the silver coins behind and departs in silence in search of an inn. The hero reflects that despite no longer being a mere mortal, he still possesses strong emotional ties to his past. The next morning, the young man passes by a carver's shop and notices a statue identical to his old childhood friend. The old sculptor recognizes Meng Hao immediately, widening his eyes in surprise before the young master in front of him. The old gentleman cries, grabbing Meng Hao, and asks desperately about the whereabouts of his son, who vanished with the boy years ago. The protagonist lies, saying that his friend is doing very well and studying far away, to comfort the suffering heart of the father. The elderly man cries with relief and thanks infinitely for knowing that his beloved heir supposedly remains alive and healthy. The young man recalls with immense sadness that in reality, his companion ended up passing away after falling into a canyon in the past. The hero says goodbye to the elderly man, wishing him great health before resuming his walk through the peaceful hometown. He plans to visit Fuga's house, knowing that his strong-toothed friend must have a bright future filled with luxuries. At the mansion of Fuga's father, an arrogant young man demands the family's properties, claiming that his brother is now an immortal. The blackmailer smiles depravedly and demands that Li Dafu's daughter, In, laws spend the night with him to avoid a family tragedy. The young woman cries in dread, while the elderly man stares at the villain with deep disgust and indignation at the absurd demand. The patriarch shouts with fury, telling the invader to vanish from his lands, even if it costs the entire wealth of his clan. The villain withdraws with disdain, promising vengeance, while the landowner tries to reassure his frightened servants. Alone in the courtyard of the luxurious mansion, the man sighs, worried about the terrible consequences of that bold refusal. He covers his face, crying desperately, and calls for the return of his beloved son Fugi to protect them once and for all. Suddenly, Manhua appears in the courtyard, revealing himself to be a great friend of the youth and assuring that the boy is doing very well. The man widens his eyes in surprise upon recognizing the young man's name and asks anxiously about Fugi's whereabouts. Manhua reassures him, revealing that the chubby boy is training far away, but will soon return much stronger and prosperous. The hero promises to resolve the problem of the blackmailing villain and asks the patriarch to order 3 special spears for him. In another mansion, the young cultivator Zhao Hai listens to his brother's accounts regarding the alleged assault suffered at the mansion. The brother lies blatantly, displaying the red mark on his face to try to stir up the fury of the young immortal. Zhao Hai, who is actually a personal disciple of Manhua, perceives his brother's farce, but promises to accompany him in 7 days. 7 days pass, and the 3 beautiful spears of iron, silver, and gold are finally delivered to the mansion's courtyard. Satisfied, the hero praises the work, observing that the replicas turned out identical to the legendary weapon of his patriarch. The young master channels his strong torrent of emerald power, covering the 3 replicas with an intense mystical aura. The servants bow in admiration, while Fugi's father cries with joy upon deducing that his son has also become an immortal. The young man mentions that he will explain everything later, because the arrogant villains have just kicked down the doors of the main courtyard. The red-haired villain marches in with disdain, demanding that the family bow on their knees before the power of his immortal brother. Zhao Hai raises his gaze and freezes completely upon recognizing that the man in front of him is none other than his supreme master. Without noticing the danger, the red-haired man keeps chattering away, while the young cultivator trembles with dread, begging him to shut his mouth. Consumed by panic, Zhao Hai delivers a violent slap against his own brother, ordering him to shut his mouth immediately. The villain is hurled against the grass floor, completely dazed by the furious and unexpected reaction of his immortal brother. Zhao Hai places his forehead on the stone floor, begging for the immediate forgiveness of his former senior leader, Manhua. Manhua stares at him with seriousness, reminding him that he should already know his true temperament very well. Zhao Hai treasures with dread with a small flame on his finger, while his red-haired brother remains fallen on the grass crying. To demonstrate his submission, Zhao Hai attacks his own brother with fire, generating desperate screams of pain in the courtyard. The villain burns intensely in the fire while the young man cries on his knees for the mercy of his master, Manhua. The hero points his finger and coldly declares that the boy will lose his powers to live only as a mere mortal. Zhao Hai coughs up blood upon feeling his entire cultivation be completely destroyed and sealed by his senior's attack. The now powerless boy gives thanks for having his life spared, while the servants begin to carry the injured body away from there. The landowner Li Dafu stares at that entire impressive demonstration of power with a perplexed look of shock. Manhua bows respectfully, apologizing for the conduct of his former servant, while the elderly man gives thanks for the salvation. The protagonist calms the gentleman, saying he resolved the situation solely because of the strong friendship he has with young Fugi. Next, he says goodbye and begins to walk slowly out of the mansion under the screams of gratitude from the servants. Fugi's father cries with emotion upon deducing that his son has indeed become an immortal and runs to make his prayers. Manhua goes on his way, knowing that he has already visited all the important people from his past in that hometown. He flies to the old cave where his entire difficult journey began, Remembering the start of his grand destiny, the boy reflects that his 3-year journey has completed a perfect cycle and brings him back to a new starting point. He jokes that little has changed in his life, because in the past he lacked money, and now he lacks spiritual stones for training. Suddenly, his eyes narrow upon noticing the threatening silhouette of Shangguan's Shu, watching him from the top of the canyon. The powerful rival reveals that he came to fetch his belongings from the sect and was just waiting for the protagonist's return. Manhua leaps from the cliff onto his flying sword, trying to quickly escape the imminent danger of his powerful enemy. Shangguan's Shu laughs out loud and initiates a relentless pursuit, telling the young man to flee with all his remaining strength. The villain channels a torrent of emerald magic, aware that the hero is hiding a treasure of immense spiritual value. The old man orders the boy to surrender to serve as spiritual fuel, while Meng Hao defends himself with his shields. Shangguan Shu's colossal green attack collides violently against the defensive barrier of the youth's flying blades. The opponent retreats astonished upon realizing that the boy has evolved incredibly fast, reaching the 8th level of cultivation. He plans to defeat Meng Hao in just 2 days so as not to lose the harvest period of his valuable mystical herbs. Meng Hao perceives that the difference in strength is immense and decides to flee by flying, as he lacks the resources to sustain the combat. The aerial pursuit extends at high speed across the forests toward the freezing, snow-covered mountains of the region. At the peak of a mountainous ridge of ice appears an immense and mysterious stone plain surrounded by cliffs. A group of 100 disciples from the Violet Fate sect waits in silent rows for the orders of their Grand Master. Elder Wu Dinkyu plays Go at the peak of the mountain and asks his companion's opinion regarding the new talented youths. The eccentric song praises the potential of the disciples, admitting that the Violet Fate clan possesses excellent warriors. Wu Dinkyu pulls out a valuable emerald celestial crystal stone, offers it as the official bet of their grand duel. Song accepts the challenge and displays the piece of mystical star that his companion had desired to obtain for a long time. He points to a distant snowy mount and proposes that the youths climb up to capture the red flag at the peak of the mountain. Wu Dinkyu smiles with pride, affirming that his dedicated warriors will conquer victory and empty that mountain of treasures. The elderly man guarantees that he has never broken a promise in 4 centuries and swears to keep his word before all those present. He warns that the test is open to any cultivator, but alerts about the real risk of them becoming food for beasts. The two continue to exchange provocations regarding the deadly strength of the wolves against the young talents of the Violet Fate sect. While the masters discuss, the disciples comment in whispers that they are being treated merely as mere betting pawns. Wu Dinkyu turns around and announces that whoever captures the flag will instantly become his personal disciple in the inner sect. He shouts, ordering the immediate start of the test, and all the warriors dash at high speed toward the snowy valley. Wu Dinkyu brags about his clan, while the rival old man reminds him that the youths will have to survive the fearsome forest of wolves. As soon as they enter the valley, the warriors are attacked by gigantic gray wolf monsters that roar fiercely in the ice. The terrible beasts advance relentlessly against the group, forcing them to fight desperately for their lives in the ice. The eccentric master smiles victoriously upon noticing that the rivals failed to even get past the first barrier of beasts. While flying on his sword, Meng Hao senses the presence of the beasts from afar and plans to use them to escape his pursuer. The scroll recapitulates the grand bet of Go played between the two elders at the top of the freezing mountain canyon. The record shows the terrible danger of the dense forest filled with fierce mystical beasts that protect the coveted flag. In the face of all the danger, the disciples continue running and leaping through the frozen trees, trying to reach the peak. Song brags about his spiritual beasts, while Wu Dinkyu tells him not to be in such a hurry with the disciples. 1 hour later, the disciples run desperately in the direction of the mountain of treasures, trying to escape the danger. Suddenly, a giant and fierce wolf appears, leaping over the group to block their progress on the path of ice. Song mocks the weak disciples, prompting the irritated Wu Dinkyu to shout, threatening to expel whoever flees the test. Song laughs out loud, revealing that half of his wealth is on the mountain, free for anyone who manages to take it. Leader Wu Dinkyu tries to intervene, reminding him of the old agreement between them, but is interrupted by his rival at the peak. With a somber look, Song warns that no one will leave there until the game of chess between them is finished once and for all. Wu Dinkyu gnashes his teeth in complete silence, feeling the immense pressure of his adversary's terrible warning. Elsewhere in the snow, the young Manhua advances injured, but maintains a confident smile on his face in his flight. The fearsome Shangwen Shu pursues him with hatred, vowing to finish the boy before he grows even stronger. The hero spots the mountain and plans to use the heavy demonic aura of the location to throw off his pursuer. Song continues bragging about his rare, exotic beasts, selected especially to protect that mountain. Wu Dinkyu points to a confident disciple who promises to tame the rare white ape using his techniques. Suddenly, the young man shouts in dread upon being brutally struck by the colossal fist of the beast in the middle of the forest. The gigantic white snow ape roars furiously, its body bathed in blood after defeating the rival without mercy. Old Song laughs out loud at the quick defeat, while his gaming companion stares at the scene without words. Song notices that two invaders have entered the forest and decides to let them pass, since the location is open to everyone. The giant ape tries to deliver a crushing blow against the hero, who quickly dodges between the trees. With a clever smile, the protagonist pulls out his powerful mystical spear, preparing to attack the large beast. A violent crash echoes through the snowy valley as the gigantic ape is struck by a destructive impact. The young man analyzes the bronze mirror and deduces that the light caused a violent internal explosion due to the beast's fur. Shangwen's Shu breaks into a cold sweat upon seeing the ape explode with just a single, mysterious command from the young protagonist. Song shouts in absolute shock, while Wu Dinkyu finds the invader's impressive ability very interesting. A massive bear covered in spikes brutally attacks the other disciples, who try to resist as best they can in the ice. The protagonist appears in the air and delivers a devastating spear strike, cutting down the colossal creature with ease. The disciples are astonished by the boy, while the furious Shangwan Shu covets the secret of his powerful treasure. Wu Dinkyu mocks the despair of his rival and suggests returning to the game, while Song's heart suffers over the losses. Song thinks that the boy's cultivation is too low to escape and plans to release an even more deadly creature. A colossal mammoth appears blocking the way, and Song celebrates from afar, predicting the protagonist's certain demise. With a single precise movement, Manhua severs the mammoth's trunk, leaving the clan master perplexed by the deed. The hero runs to the peak of the snowy mountain, hoping that the strong aura of the location will prevent his enemy's advance. During his rapid ascent, the young master focuses his gaze on a small vial of pills amidst the rocks. He glides agilely across the frozen ground and manages to grab the vial of mystical medicine with great skill in mid-flight. The hero tucks away the valuable vial of pills, while leader Wu Dinkyu praises the young man's immense luck from afar. Song tries to minimize the hero's luck, but despairs upon seeing another beast be struck by the mirror trick. Song points to a dangerous giant eagle, but the creature also ends up being struck in a painful manner by him. Upon seeing the boy reach the peak and take the legendary mystical net, Song panics and tries to interrupt the test. Wu Dinkyu holds his rival's shoulder firmly, preventing him from acting and demanding the promise to let them take the treasures. At the highest point of the mountain, the coveted red flag flutters sovereign under the freezing wind of that mountain range. The protagonist finally reaches the summit of the mountain and sighs in relief for throwing off his dangerous enemy. He spots a mysterious storage bag under the flag and deduces that he has found the greatest treasure there. The hero takes the valuable bag and knocks down the flag before leaping from the cliff to begin his final escape. Further below, The furious Shangwen Shu walks among the fallen bodies of the beasts that were defeated by the youth. The villain stares at the debris of the combat with a look of deep indignation, vowing to capture the boy in the forest. The disciples of the sect shout in outrage over the boy's intrusion and the loss of the valuable prizes from the peak. Wu Dingqiu continues confronting the master, reminding him that a respected elder must keep his word. The leader forces his rival to sit back down to continue the game of chess, preventing him from pursuing the hero. The two elders close a deal for a draw and decide to end the duel while staring at the chessboard. Wu Dingqiu orders the students to search for the hero's mystical spear, promising a spot in the sect as a prize. He secretly warns them to only negotiate for the weapon without using force, under the risk of being expelled from the clan. The disciples of the sect bow respectfully and accept the search mission ordered by their leader. 7 days later, the imposing wall of the city of Dongsu appears, protected by a massive dome of light. Manhua stares at the magical glow in the sky, realizing that that is a large city of powerful cultivators. Hours earlier, the young master was organizing in the cave all the immense and rich loot obtained at the peak of the mountain. Holding the pills in the palm of his hand, he understands that he will need help to identify the medicines. He opens the ancient mystical scroll and deduces that the artifact serves especially for beast taming. The young man analyzes the brightly glowing black net, knowing that the item possesses an immense mystical and strategic value. Finally, the hero opens the valuable storage bag that he retrieved at the highest point of that mountain. He is shocked to notice the gigantic internal space of the bag, which is capable of holding rivers and mountains. The boy celebrates the fact of obtaining a supreme treasure, but soon begins to think about the dangers of his action. The young man fears the vengeance of the mountain's owners, but decides to just move forward with the utmost care. Determined, the youth follows the trail toward the city gates to unlock the secret of his pills. 2 guards on their flying swords intercept the hero, demanding the entry fee in cultivation stones. Feigning weakness, the young man makes a humble bow and says he is just a simple traveler from the mountains. The guard treats him very well and grants a special discount, charging only a single stone for entry. The young man walks along satisfied through the streets, thinking about how much it stung his wallet to spend that single mystical stone. Upon spotting the pharmacies, he decides to compare his pills with the local products to save his money. He spends hours analyzing the herbs and comparing the aroma of his medicines with the items displayed in the shop. 3 days later, the hero discovers that he possesses 8 valuable pills that can be sold for a good price. The young man stares at the luxurious pavilion, decided to enter to identify the rare pills that still remain. A beautiful attendant receives him with a friendly smile and offers to help the boy with his purchases. The young man asks if the shop has detailed records, and the young woman gently guides him to the large bookshelf. The young lady offers a valuable ancient record in jade that describes the pills of the entire southern domain all at once. Manhua remembers the power of his mirror and plans to use the artifact to duplicate the valuable item in his hand. The young lady approaches in a bold manner, promising a large discount if he says thank you in a very special way. Completely flustered by the attendant's seductive attitude, the young man stammers, asking for help in the negotiation. The beautiful young woman smiles amusedly and asks the shy hero to call her big sister from now on. Shortly after, the purchase is finalized, and the friendly Qiaoling delivers the valuable object into the young master's hands. Satisfied with his new acquisition, the protagonist walks calmly out of the trade pavilion. He smiles in relief upon noticing that the investment was worth it, and that the rare pills have been identified. On the balcony, the old merchant asks about the boy, and Qiaoling says that he is strong but still very naive. The protagonist halts his steps upon crossing paths unexpectedly with his former sect companion, Zhou Kai. The leader of the group asks who the boy is, and Zhou Kai explains that he was a member of the defunct Reliance sect. The warriors around begin to whisper, remembering that the young man inherited the legendary spear of his patriarch. Suddenly, the group surrounds the protagonist, who asks with seriousness what they want with that approach. The man with the fan smiles, claiming he wishes only to see closely the powerful weapon that the boy carries with him. The young master narrows his eyes, maintaining total silence before the provocation of those adversaries. The leader insists in an arrogant manner, asking for the hero to show the item and satisfy everyone's curiosity there. The other disciples laugh with disdain and try to pressure the boy to pull out his divine weapon in the courtyard. Without showing fear, the protagonist extends his hand and firmly grips the handle of his imposing spear. He pulls out his legendary weapon and warns seriously that anyone who has a desire for demise can approach to look. The enemies analyze the mysterious spear and whisper that it does not seem to possess any visible mystical power. The hero plans to escape toward the city gates, knowing he will need to sleep in the middle of the forest again. Suddenly, an imposing group of elite warriors from the Violet Fate sect enters, marching into the location. Manhwa freezes upon recognizing the clothes of the rival clan and notices that they have just blocked his escape route. The hero's rival runs to bow respectfully before the elite in the hope of gaining friendship. The warriors totally ignore the arrogant sycophant and pass straight through toward the center of the large courtyard. To the general astonishment of everyone, the warriors bow with respect before the young man and invite him for dinner. Kai stares at the scene in admiration at seeing his former sect companion receive such courtesy from the elite. The clan leaders praise the boy's great deeds on the mountain and confirm the incredible power of his spear. Manhwa decides to confirm once and for all that he really was wielding that spear on the day of the sect's test. Chualing stares at the young man from afar, impressed by the deep respect that the warriors display for him. The warriors say they do not care about the previous loots and focus all attention on the young man's spear. They humbly beg for the young man to sell the spear, promising to pay a large fortune for the weapon. Manhwa warns that the spear is ordinary, but his rival insists that he noticed a unique mark on the iron shaft of the weapon. The opponents reveal that Elder Wu desires the weapon and proceed to pressure the hero in an intimidating manner. The hero accepts making the deal, thinking that he will not be deceiving them since he warned that the weapon was ordinary iron. The two disciples begin to contest the purchase, offering bags full of mystical stones for the item. The protagonist deduces that both rivals compete solely for the reward and prestige promised by their master. One of them gathers his friend's savings, accumulating more than 2,000 cultivation stones in his offer. The other rival counters by offering rare celestial water pills to compensate for the lack of coins in the courtyard. The two begin to argue loudly, offering more treasures while the protagonist simply observes. The dispute turns very tense, and one of them decides to bet his most valuable spiritual jewel in the negotiation. He displays a frightening spike of green energy, revealing that the item possesses a terrible freezing strength. The spectators watch in shock, recognizing the legendary and feared artifact of destruction of that sect. The adversary responds by raising an imposing mystical fan capable of attacking and defending with great efficiency. The boy breaks into a cold sweat, worried about angering the rival sect, but realizes that it is now impossible to cancel the exchange. They continue offering poisonous pills and rare treasures, transforming the negotiation into a massive chaos. Faced with the impasse, the two decide to pool their fortunes and buy the iron spear in partnership all at once. With a joint handshake, the two warriors hold the mystical spear, very grateful for the negotiation. The hero watches the two walk away with the ordinary iron spear, feeling a light drop of sweat on his face. From high on the balcony, the old merchant mocks the naivety of the two young warriors who were deceived. He smokes his pipe, laughing as he remembers that the hero had clearly warned that the item was just ordinary iron. The beautiful Qiaoling bursts out laughing, finding that entire situation incredibly amusing for her day at the shop. The hero flees by flying on his new mystical fan, aware that he has offended another grand sect and needs to hide. At the top of the mountain, Wu Dinkyu continues giving philosophical advice regarding mental control to the irritated Song. He invites his rival to visit his temple and learn the spiritual techniques of mental self-control. The young disciples return to the peak and proudly present the supposed sacred weapon to their leader. The leader celebrates the success of the young men, promoting both to the elite, while Song just observes with anger. They guarantee with pride that they carried out a very fair exchange and that they did no harm to the young man. The master raises the glowing spear, calling his rival to admire closely the great power of the divine artifact. The instant he holds the simple iron weapon, the master's look changes to a state of complete panic. He asks tremblingly what exactly his disciples delivered in exchange for that iron shaft. Smiling, the young men joyfully list the immense amount of valuable treasures delivered to the protagonist. Upon hearing about the immense financial loss, Song bursts out laughing and wipes away tears from laughing so much at the game. Wu Dinkyu loses control of his mind and roars, declaring that the young men bought nothing but useless old iron. The furious scream of the master echoes through the entire region, making the people in the city laugh at the protagonist's audacity. Half a month later, the hero finds an isolated cave ideal for beginning his new period of peace training. 2 months pass, and the young master emerges in the clearing, revealing that he has successfully reached the 8th level. He reflects on the cost of the bronze mirror, lamenting the price charged to duplicate his cultivation pills. The young man calculates that he will need an immense fortune in spiritual stones to advance in level once more. Without the support of his old sect, he understands that he needs to get strong fast, so as not to be crushed by rivals. With determination shining in his eyes, the hero decides to focus his life on seeking his own real power. Suddenly, an immense torrent of mystical light erupts from the skies, striking the vegetation with a violent crash. Flying on his mystical fan, the boy travels peacefully in the direction of the bustling capital of Zhao. He recalls his times as a frustrated student and plans to visit the great city to fulfill an old desire. On the way, the young man accepts a ride in a carriage and converses with a young student who is heading toward the city. The student Zheng Yong praises Menghao's intelligence and behavior during their entire long journey. The young man asks what the true definition of a scholar is, and the youth recites the classic advice on conduct. With a thoughtful look, the protagonist extends his inquiry, asking his friend about what life is. The young Zheng Yong responds in a poetic manner, comparing the destiny of life to the natural cycle of snow in winter. He explains that even if the snow wants the warmth of summer, it will melt if it approaches a warm campfire. The snow melts and transforms into pure water in the young man's palm, indicating that that is no longer its place. The wooden carriage advances slowly, crossing the imposing stone gates of the monumental capital of Zhao. Meng Hao expresses his thanks for the ride and respectfully says goodbye to the attentive student Zheng Yong at the city entrance. The student watches the hero walk alone and reflects on whether his destiny would also be like the cold cycle of the snow. Meng Hao stares at the imposing Tang Tower, remembering when he desired to pass the examinations to go to the Great Tang territory. He enters the beautiful palace and stares in admiration at a gigantic painting that portrays in detail the rich and mystical Tang land. With an agile leap, the protagonist lands on the snowy peak of the tower's sumptuous roof under the cold night wind. He observes the immense, illuminated landscape of the city, realizing that it is not possible to spot the legendary region of Chang'an. He remembers his parents and sits cross-legged on the snowy roof to begin a focused nightly meditation. The young master closes his eyes, recalling with great nostalgia the mysterious day on which his beloved parents disappeared. He recalls the strong purple gale that blew outside his old residence on that unforgettable day. The hero remembers his father's sad look and his mother's crying shortly before the two vanished mysteriously into the wind. Although many say that his parents passed away, he knows deep in his heart that they remain alive somewhere. The imposing tower remains silent under the twilight light, symbolizing the mysteries of his past and future. Feeling much more relieved and invigorated, the young master decides that it is the ideal moment to resume his journey. The protagonist leaps from the roof and begins to fly majestically above the beautiful buildings of the capital on his magical fan. Suddenly, the hero widens his eyes in astonishment upon feeling a frightening and inexplicable mystical shockwave. The young man lands unexpectedly on the roof and stares in shock as an immense pillar of mystical light descends directly from the skies. The boy deduces that only cultivators can spot that mysterious glow and wonders about the reason for the phenomenon. He notices dozens of people kneeling, paying respects below the tower, and finds that entire scene very bizarre. The pillar of light transforms into a terrible spatial rift, generating heavy discharges of blue lightning in the clouds. A colossal and frightening whirlpool of electricity and wind covers the skies right above the roof of the imposing tower. The boy stares at the whirlpool of wind, with his heart racing, noticing that something sinister is descending from the middle of the portal. An immense army of thousands of skeletons and ancient bones appears, spinning in a chaotic manner inside the storm. The torrent of skeletons glows intensely in the sky, covering the entire horizon with a frightening mist of death. The protagonist grips the tower tiles with extreme difficulty so as not to be swallowed by the heavy storm in the sky. Perceiving the terrible, imminent danger, the young man activates his mystical fan and flees flying at high speed from that courtyard. The hero sweats with dread as he reports that he spotted a gigantic and malevolent stone coffin hidden in the middle of those bones. He recalls the terrible coffin that carried a frightening, skeletal creature sitting cross-legged at the peak. In the instant of visual contact, the monster opened its eyes, revealing 7 strange stellar lights glowing in its pupils. Feeling a terrible pain in his eyes, Manhua perceives a black and corrosive mist of death begin to emanate from his pores. Terrified, he deduces that the ancient tower conceals supernatural secrets that go far beyond the understanding of mortals.